I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got love, peace, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got power, poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA.
Hello and welcome back to my channel What If Deku 2. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off part 4 of our series, What If Introvert Deku Had a Flame Quirk? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is Razuhfy from Fanfiction.net. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. Todoroki's friend is very passionate, no? Inji begrudgingly agreed with his daughter. He'd heard plenty enough from Shoto about the green-haired pyro user. He had been curious about the boy for a long time. Shoto seldomly interacted with those of his age and preferred to self-isolate. To know that he had someone who, Inji assumed at least, was in the midst of creating a relationship that bordered on a friendly rivalry. Well, forgive him for taking a decidedly heavy interest in the boy. He is a shy child. Inji's eyes slid towards his third wife, watching the dark-skinned woman lean back in her seat. Hopelessly awkward. Though, Shoto was the same when he was younger. Wouldn't you agree, Fayumi? Inji returned his gaze back upon the students, focusing on the children of one as his daughter responded to her mother. Children that had been forced to kill. It was a sad thing. Inji wasn't a saint, nor would he ever claim to be. He wasn't perfect, far from it. His ideals and beliefs when he was younger centered on being the best, the strongest, the most courageous. Arrogance is a slow and insidious killer. Toya had been the result of that arrogance and self-centeredness. Inji had watched his firstborn nearly kill himself with his fire, all to impress him. It had been a life-changing event. His spawn, his seed, desperately trying to prove himself at the tender age of 6 and doing more harm than good. Perhaps Toya resented him these days. Inji didn't truly know. They seldomly spoke to one another these days. Their last interaction had been when the Usj incident occurred. He didn't blame his son for the way he may or may not feel. He had all but forced Toya to give up his dream on becoming a hero. That was his sin to bear. To deny a child their dream. It had a profound effect that would forever stick with them. Inji didn't regret his decision. He'd rather his son be alive than wasting away in an IQ trying to chase an impossible dream. He wouldn't blame Toya for hating him. One day the boy would understand, when he settled down and had children of his own. Toya would come to realize why he had done what he did. Even now, Toya stood off to the side, gazing down at the arena with a wistful gaze. The hoodie he wore to conceal his scars did little to hide the boy's face and emotions. Toya would have been an incredible hero had circumstances been different. Inji knew it in his bones, but he couldn't allow it. Perhaps, with time, they could sort out their differences and speak to one another as men. Inji glanced to his left, feeling a comforting hand intertwining with his own. Soft, gray eyes stared up at him, framed by a curtain of snow-white hair. Go. Rei spoke softly, gesturing towards Toya with her head. Talk with him. The words nearly caused him to recoil. Here? Now? Inji grimaced at the thought, and he knew he failed to hide it when Rei's expression hardened. Avoiding the issue won't solve it. You two have had years to settle your issues. Ice began to spread along his hand as she continued to speak. Take the first step, or I will flash freeze you. Hypothermia or an emotional conversation with his firstborn son who likely hated his guts. The cold didn't seem that bad. A grunt of pain escaped his lips as his wife's hands squeezed tighter, further spreading the ice. A single glance towards his first wife was all the motivation he truly needed. With a put-upon sigh, Inji melted the ice covering his arm and slowly lumbered his way towards his firstborn. As the towering man skulked his way towards his son, Rei smiled happily. It's about time. A scoff followed. Should have whipped him a long time ago. Language is death. Ray warned as she side-eyed the retired Russian pro-hero. Do not make me repeat myself. Esdeath rolled her eyes but offered a sardonic salute. Yes, ma'am. What are Shoto's chances of winning the tournament? Natsuo piped up from beside Esdeath. Do ya think he'll go all the way? The finals are most certainly guaranteed, Esdeath replied nonchalantly. But the killer instinct that Midoriya boy has will make Shoto second-guess himself. Natsuo and the rest of the Todoroki family spared Esdeath a confused glance. Rolling her eyes while crossing her arms across her chest, she replied, That boy is dangerous. It's in the eyes. That didn't explain anything, though Esdeath rarely ever made sense, so it wasn't that surprising. Well, I'll cheer for Shoto all the same, Fayumi spoke with a smile, pumping her fists as she watched the students march towards one of the tunnels to begin the first event. Well said, daughter. Tear agreed, nodding her head as she watched Enji and Toya silently vacate the VIP booth. Good. It was about time those two addressed their issues. Tear wished the best for both of them. I wanted to apologize again, Fo. It's fine. Izuku interrupted uncharacteristically. You don't have to apologize, Momo. She begged to differ on that. She'd never forgive herself for her actions. With a frown, Momo glanced ahead from the darkness of the tunnel, watching her classmates speak with one another. She had all but dragged Izuku away from the class to speak with him privately about what had happened weeks ago. Every chance he got, he cut her off or downplayed the situation. It couldn't be fine. Momo refused to believe that Izuku would forgive her so easily. She couldn't accept it. Not when he could push her away so easily. I don't believe you, she murmured quietly, grasping her arm nervously. Is it really so hard to believe that I'd forgive you? Izuku questioned quietly, leaning against the wall of the tunnel. Momo was silent for a few moments before hesitantly nodding her head. A quiet sigh escaped Izuku as he scratched at his hair, trying to think of how to properly handle this situation. After a few moments of quiet deliberation, he responded to the girl's wordless answer. What would it take for me to convince you? Momo grimaced at the question, averting her gaze from the pyro user. Chewing nervously on her bottom lip, she answered quietly. I don't know. Well, that didn't really help. Izuku didn't know how to handle the situation. He truly had forgave Momo. Yes, he had been frustrated and overwhelmed in the beginning, but he didn't hate the girl. Momo lived every day with a burden on her shoulders. She was All Might's protege, the greatest, strongest, and most esteemed hero. Momo was, realistically, just a child. All of her doubts and insecurities were self-placed. She didn't need to surpass All Might, nor did she have to be All Might. That was the root of the issue. Momo had likely convinced herself that she needed to become the second coming of All Might. Izuku heavily disagreed. Voicing his opinion had been met with denial, and he didn't know how to proceed. He possessed very little social experiences in the first place. How was he to help a girl with issues that transcended his own experiences? How was he to be a hero if he couldn't aid his friend in her time of need? Did all heroes, at one point, feel this hopelessness that he now feels? The knowledge that no matter what they did or said, it just wasn't enough. It was frustrating. Why you? You know you don't have to surpass All Might, right? He asked once again, glancing at the taller girl. She shook her head. I wouldn't be able to anyway. Izuku grimaced at her defeated tone. Well, that certainly didn't help his case. At this point, he was just going to dig the girl deeper. It didn't make sense to him. How could Momo have these insecurities when she was so powerful? The girl was the strongest in the class by a landslide. It wasn't even relatively close. Momo was the most flexible student in 1A in terms of hero work. Her original quirk allowed her to easily mold into any role with ease. Apprehending villains? She could create handcuffs, cages, ropes, hell, even various types of lethal and non-lethal guns to neutralize the villain. Burning building, easy. Create a makeshift water tower and a long hose with a nozzle. Collapsed building. She was able to make the necessary tools to help locate trapped civilians and then create the tools necessary to pry them from the debris. Combating a violent villain or person, gun, bat, staff, armor and riot gear, stun grenades, flash grenades, riot spray and tear gas. The possibilities were endless. How did the girl herself not see it? This was all before even attaining one for all. With it, the girl could become the physically most powerful individual in the world. Where did this doubt stem from, and how could he help mitigate it? He didn't know, but he wouldn't give up on her. Momo needed someone to believe in her that wasn't all might. Toshinori was a biased viewer whether he believed it or not, and his words carried less weight. Izuku would be Momo's #1 fan. Would it solve her insecurities? Probably not, but it was likely the best shot he had. I believe in you, Momo. It probably doesn't mean much, but He nervously glanced away, stuttering quietly as he watched his friends converse with one another. I think you'll be a great hero one day. Momo didn't reply, and Izuku wasn't going to push the issue. At this point, anything he said could potentially damage her psyche even further. It was probably for the better that she remained silent. You two done flirting back there? Izuku squawked at Mina's question, nearly sliding off the wall he was leaning against. Ashido-san. Screaming my name only gets me going. Another squawk followed shortly after. The children of this era were growing more and more powerful. Hundreds of thousands of quirks all merging and mixing, creating new and unheard of abilities. It was fascinating. It was poetic. It was disgusting. All for one listened to his student rage and rant for the umpteenth time since the Usj incident. He had grown accustomed to Tamura's incessant outbursts. It was immature and grating, but he would suffer through it. Tamura was a powerful pawn. A childish one to be sure, but moldable all the same. He would become the perfect vessel to tear down this wretched society and walk upon its ashes. Look at them, those NPCs prancing around like they own the place. I hate it. Tamura raged from his wheelchair. All for one listened half-heartedly as his student berated the class of 1A, specifically the Fyrus quirk user and the pyrokinetic user. Interesting boys, to be sure. Endeavor's child seemed to be growing in spades, seemingly mastering his fire and ice to a degree that he was capable of combining them together. He had even managed to permanently damage Tamura with his quirk. Even now, his student was far from being able to enact his threats with his condition. A minor setback, but a setback all the same. Who would have thought that the children training to be heroes would actually step up to the plate? These children were certainly worth keeping an eye on. His mole in the class was sure to report back some interesting things about the children. As Tamura ranted some more, destroying a dish or two with his quirk, all for one contemplated their next move. With the high-end Nomu out of commission, what an annoyance that had been to learn about. Their plans had to be set back a bit further. Or perhaps all was not lost. Perhaps Tamura's raving could be put to good use. What was a spectacle such as the UA Sports Festival without a little mayhem? The high-end Nomu they couldn't spare, but certainly one of the lesser ones would do the job just fine. No? Why not showcase a little extra fear for society? Public perception was a powerful thing when you stood on the side of honor and justice. What would the world think of a school incapable of properly defending its students? Why, the HPSC may even step in and make matters worse. Do you happen to know the coordinates of the U? A sports festival arena, Kirigiri? Tamura's angry raving ceased at all for one's question. It was broken a moment later by the mist-like man. I do. A wicked grin bloomed on the master villain's face. Why not kill two birds with one stone, he proposed in an amused manner. Gather one of the upper-tier Nomu. We'll give them a show they won't forget. A taste of what is to come. The obstacle course was a rather uneventful event. Sure, there was giant zero-pointers and dangerous terrain, but it was nothing that the entirety of Class 1 couldn't handle. The best part of the race had been the sheer amount of sabotage his classmates had been doing. It nearly brought a tear to Izuku's eye as he watched his classmates deliberately take out various students from other classes. Was it good sportsmanship? Nah. Did it feel good? Absolutely. Only 42 contestants were allowed to pass this particular event. To no surprise, the entirety of their class had managed to cross the finish line, alongside the entirety of Class 1B. An outlier from 1H had managed to cross the line alongside 1C Shinso. If anyone was going to be targeted, it was him. Izuku leaned against one of the finish line poles, staring directly at the back of the boy who had openly mocked him in front of his class. His blood boiled at the sight and his flames responded in kind. They simmered and glided along his fingertips and hands, begging to be thrown around. I'd say congratulations on getting first place, but you might burn me. An excitable feminine voice had Izuku snapping out of his intense glare. Turning his head towards the source, he was taken aback by the sheer close proximity from the individual. Unique, green-yellow eyes that looked like a sniper's scope stared into his very soul. He did not scream like a girl. However, he did squeak in surprise. It was both awkward and hilariously unmanly, though the pink-haired girl with dreadlocks didn't seem to be much bothered by it. Air. He coughed into his fist, taking a step away from the shorter girl. Hello. Nice to meet. You? The excitable girl bounced on the balls of her heels before stepping closer, and by closer, Izuku meant that she quite literally molded up against him, chest to chest. 1. Soft, squishy chest. 2. Brain rot. 3. Shut down. Mei Hatsum, the quirky and oblivious girl, greeted with a megawatt grin, not knowing what her sizable assets were doing to Izuku. I hear you're the one to beat. You're kinda famous, no? Reboot. Izuku twitched as blood rushed to his cheeks. He took a step back from the girl and her respectable assets before nervously responding. I Izuku am Midoriya. Ooh, I guess so. How wonderful. The girl giggled in a slightly psychotic way before stepping, once more, into Izuku's personal space. When you get famous and go pro, we can have super cute babies for you to showcase. Izuku's brain broke. What happened to him? Gyro asked with a raised brow. Some hottie with more bosoms than brains broke him. Mina answered casually as she poked her comatose classmate. Usually I'm the one breaking him, but it's funny all the same. Ashido-san, stop poking Izuku. Momo spoke with a minor shake of the head. You can poke him too, Yao Momo. No one's stopping ya. The pink-skinned girl replied easily with a smile. Tempting offer. Very tempting. When does the next event start? Todoroki questioned, slowly making his way towards the group. Intermission started like 5 minutes ago. Any time now, I'd assume. Gyro answered casually, kneeling beside Midoriya and joining Mina in poking the boy. You guys got a marker? I'm too young to be a father. Izuku awoke with a scream, subsequently terrifying the two girls poking him and causing them to fall on their rears. Why are you two yelling? Completely unnecessary. Why you? Mina growled before tackling the boy, pinning him to the ground before attempting to tickle him. Hold his feet down, Gyro. The purple-haired girl immediately dove atop the boy's abdomen while grabbing at his legs to prevent him from thrashing away. I'm being assaulted. Help me, Izuku yelped, laughing uncontrollably as his two friends ticked him. Should we help? Todoroki casually asked, glancing towards Momo. We probably should. She answered easily, watching the boy thrash around as Gyro and Mina traded turns tickling him. 1 minute. Todoroki just nodded his head, gazing down at his friend with a raised brow. The boy had managed to somehow get Gyro off of him and were now tag-teaming Mina, tickling her together. Quite the show. He spoke blandly. I'm sure this is great publicity. Wait, we're being aired right now? Izuku questioned in shock, momentarily pausing and allowing Mina to squirm her way out of her friend's hold. The entire event is streamed. Momo responded with furrowed brows. There are no ads when it's streamed. Didn't you know that? I've never watched them on streaming services. Todoroki blinked before deciding to respond. Oh, well, congratulations. I'm sure there won't be tons of fanfiction about this very moment. The Yaoyorozu heiress glanced towards the dual quirk user with a confused expression. What's fanfiction? Indeed, what is fanfiction? The dual-haired answered unhelpfully. It's short stories, mostly written by teenage girls, that have their favorite characters from TV, anime, or cartoons having sex and or doing raunchy things with one another. Mina answered with a casual smile, slowly brushing off the dirt and grass from her uniform. What? Izuku questioned with blood-stained cheeks. I should also mention that a ton of it is usually man on man. The girls love gay men. Mina added in with a large grin, laughing at Izuku's shocked expression. You don't read fanfiction? Gyro questioned with a raised brow, ignoring Mina's teasing. I'm surprised considering you're such a hero nerd. I honestly thought you'd be the type to write your own stories about heroes and stuff. Izuku shook his head with a blush before slowly standing to his feet and dusting off his uniform. I mean, it sounds neat. I'd be interested in reading about hero stories, though not that stuff. You sure? Mina asked with a smirk as she wrapped an arm around the boy. I promise it's really good. Very detailed. Izuku only grimaced at the girl's words. I'm sure, Ashido-sen. The pink-skinned girl leaned closer, speaking in a lower tone. You sure? There's even girl-on-girl stuff, like Merco and MT, lady? Now that was very tempting. He didn't get to answer as Midnight's voice boomed around the arena. Welcome back. Wasn't that obstacle race an absolute doozy? The R-rated hero grinned as a roaring cheer erupted from the crowd. Your cheers are getting me all riled up, she emphasized her words with a mighty crack of her flogging whip. Is it just me, or is she even more beautiful? Mina questioned with a raised brow, cringing at the volume of the crowd. Only 42 students are allowed to partake in this next event. Midnight cracked her whip once more before gesturing towards a gigantic screen on one side of the arena. Here are our 42 participants. To the surprise of absolutely no one, most of these spots are populated of students from 1A and 1B. Cue loud cheering that practically deafened Gyro. However, we have 2 outliers from 1H and 1C. Oh, how exciting! I wonder which 16 students will move on to the finals. Midnight cracked her whip again, causing the image of the screen to change. The image now revealed a leaderboard that had every student's name and what place they came in during the obstacle race. Our next event will have our contestants teaming up in groups of no more than 4 individuals. Once teams have been formed, you will all play a unique game of capture, the flag and king of the hill that I personally like to call Capture the Hill. Izuku winced at the roaring cheers. That's very unimaginative. The name could have been better. Quiet you, the voluptuous woman barked, shaking her whip towards Izuku's direction and cracking it. Don't make me spank you. Izuku backed off instantly, raising his hands in a placating motion with red cheeks. Midnight spun on her heels, whip hand gesturing towards the large screen showing all the students' names. Our incredibly action-packed and aptly named event will be scored by a point system made up from the placements of your team members. The higher the placing, the higher the score. The students watched with interest as the scores started out relatively normally. Aoyama had the lowest score considering he had came in last place and was awarded with 5 points. It wasn't until it got to Momo's name that everything changed. With an impressive 205 that had the girl cracking a smile, all the students patiently waited for Izuku's score, expecting it to be 210. They were all shocked beyond reason to see 10 million suddenly appear on the screen, horrifying the aforementioned teen who boasted the ridiculous score. Ha 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 ha, congratulations class rep, Midnight jeered with a dirty smirk, staring directly into the boy's eyes. Seems you have a knack for being on top, no? If you want to be the best, then you have to deal with the burden of being the best. Izuku nervously rubbed the back of his neck as he glanced around, watching the entirety of 1B eye him predatorily. This was going to be an issue. However, the next event was a team event. All he had to do was find 3 others who didn't necessarily mind his score while being the target of potentially 5 teams. Only 16 students were guaranteed to pass this next event, which meant that not everyone from 1A was able to make it to the finals. The sports festival purposely favored the hero courses and promoted competition between all students. In the rare event that the hero courses decided to team up against their fellow courses, the second event would curtail further teaming and pit all students against one another to move on to the finals. Izuku glanced around the arena, watching as the students quietly conversed with one another. Though the entirety of Class 1A refused to acknowledge Class 1B and conversed with each other about potential teaming. There was potential for the finals to be only 1A filled, but Izuku highly doubted that was going to happen. Even if all 20 of 1A worked together, one team would have to take the fall and prevent the other classes and students from proceeding. They would also be knocked from the competition. This second event was doing a good job of breaking up the alliance that had been pre-established. The only question was which team from 1A would take the fall. Once teams have been formed, I'll explain the rules and what can and can't be done for the event. You have 15 minutes to plan and choose your teammates. Time begins. Now, Midnight cracked her whip, causing a timer to appear on the giant screen. What are you thinking, Izuku-kun? Mina asked with a smile. Izuku glanced around the arena, watching as teams began to slowly form. Most of 1B had already made their decisions while teaming with one another. He spotted a few 1A teams and merely nodded his head quietly. Izuku glanced at Todoroki and Momo before sighing quietly. I don't think we should team up. Todoroki raised an eyebrow at the boy's statement before speaking. Your reason? Izuku glanced around the arena once more before explaining. Todoroki-kun, Momo, Bakugo and I are, objectively, the strongest students in 1A. If we want to prevent 1B from advancing, then we should all split up and help each other. Yeah, I think Bakugo will even listen. He's been mad dogging you since Midnight announced your score. Gyro questioned with a raised brow. He'll have no choice to. Izuku responded with a shrug, not explaining how he was going to get Bakugo to aid. If we want an all-1A finals, then we need to split up. You two in? He questioned towards Momo and Todoroki. The dual-haired teen nodded his head as he spoke. It shouldn't be that hard. Sounds easy enough. Momo agreed with a nod of her head. Good luck you two. She bounded off a moment later, seeking to team with her classmates from 1A. I'd love to team with ya Izuku-kun, but I think I'm gonna hang with Yao Momo. No hard feelings, yeah? The acid user questioned with a carefree smile. Izuku merely shook his head with a smile. It's fine, Ishido-san. I'll see you in the finals. Bye-bye, she sang with a smile, racing off towards the voluptuous girl. Todoroki nodded his head towards Gyro and Izuku before moving to find his own team. Good luck you two. Gyro offered the boy a simple nod before glancing towards Izuku and speaking. Guess it's you and me for now. Who do ya have in mind for teammates? She crossed her arms against her chest, watching Todoroki and Yaoyorozu form teams with various 1A students. Izuku pursed his lips for a moment before ultimately shrugging his shoulders. Well, with myself, Todoroki-kun, Momo and Bakugo, we're guaranteed to have the top 16 move on. Kinda arrogant thinking, don't you think? She questioned curiously, twirling one of her earlobes. Izuku smiled at the girl's words. Well, it is a team event at the end of the day, and one has some of the best team cohesion. It's just unfortunate that one of our teams won't be able to proceed to the finals. Gyro was about to respond before a blur of pink suddenly appeared in their little huddle, nearly knocking her to the floor while simultaneously invading Izuku's personal space. Hello again, Midoriya, a familiar female voice shot off in an excited tone. Want a team? You and me can take the event by storm. All you gotta do is let me make you some babies. Izuku croaked uncomfortably, feeling Hatsume's chest rub against his own. He enjoyed it. Really, he did. It was bliss. Heaven-like. Beautiful. But he was incredibly inexperienced with all things women and girl-related. Bosoms were glorious, yes, but once presented in a manner such as this, he didn't know how to react. Such was the curse of a socially awkward teen with raging hormones. Stop with the baby talk, he stuttered with red cheeks, stepping away from the busty girl. What's this obsession with you and having babies with people you don't know? The quirky girl tilted her head as she answered, My babies are my gadgets. What were you thinking? Izuku didn't offer a response. Hatsume blinked before ultimately shrugging and bouncing on the tips of her toes. So, what do you say? You, me, team? Izuku glanced towards Gyro, who merely shrugged her shoulders, not really having anything against the odd girl. Well, I don't mind, but Gyro and I are together already, so it'd be us three for starters. The support student blinked before twisting to stare at Gyro. She blinked a single time before speaking with a large grin. Cool ears, I could make so many babies for you too. The possibilities. Want a team? Gyro cracked a smirk at the quirky girl. She wasn't all that bad. Sure, dude. I'd love to. Izuku sighed quietly, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, there goes our all-one-a final. He shrugged his shoulders before gazing at the remaining students who had yet to team together. Looking for a +1, Midoriya-chan. Izuku turned his head to the side, spotting Tsuyu making her way towards their group. With a smile, he welcomed the frog girl. We'd love to have you, Tsu-san. The girl released a cute ribbit before dropping to her haunches, mimicking the frogs her quirk was based off of. You had Todoroki and Yaoyorozu make their own teams, didn't you? Izuku smiled to himself as he replied. Just a safety net to guarantee that 1B don't make it to the finals. Smart. She croaked with an adorable ribbit. What do you think the next event is going to be? With the scores and the mention of some type of King of the Hill and capture the flag game, I'd assume that we're merging our points together and are going to be stealing other teams' points while defending our own. How? Don't really know, but that's the best I got. Gyro hypothesized with a shrug. So, we all know each other's quirks, but we don't know yours, Hatsume-san. Izuku spoke, glancing towards the odd and quirky girl. Any details for us? The pink-haired girl grinned as she spun on her heels. My quirk is called Zoom. She pointed to her eyes, highlighting the sniper-like crosshair in her pupils. It allows me to see up to 5 kilometers away with crystal-clear 20/20 vision. Welp. That wasn't very helpful if the next event was more combat-based. However, the girl was a support student, and therefore she was allowed to use any of her gadgets for the tournament. That was a positive, at least. The one students then went on to briefly explain their own quirks to the support student, who nodded her head rapidly, memorizing the information for future baby making. Time's up, Midnight boomed, followed by the crack of her whip. I hope you're all ready to get down and dirty for the next event. She paused momentarily, allowing the cheering crowd to do their intended job. Now that your teams have been chosen, allow me to explain the rules of Capture the Hill. The voluptuous woman gestured towards the giant screen, cracking her whip as an image appeared with all the teams created. Capture the Hill is a unique style of game where teams select one member as their base. Once that individual has been chosen, They will be required to wear these specialized headbands that showcase their team's point value. And these unique vests that will be explained later. She paused for a moment, allowing the screen to show an example of what she was speaking about. The goal of the game is to capture other teams' headbands. Cheers and roars sounded out, and Midnight allowed the crowd to hype up the event. But there's a twist, the R-rated woman suddenly roared. Once your base has been chosen, they are not allowed to move from their spots. Each base is then partnered with one defender. The person that defends the base must remain within a 5-foot perimeter and cannot exceed those bounds. If they do, these specialized vests they're wearing will emit an electrical shock that will temporarily prevent them from moving for 10 seconds. The woman proceeded to pull out the unique-looking vest from somewhere before holding it up for the crowd to witness. The remaining 2 members of the team will be attackers. Their job is self-explanatory. They are to steal the headbands of other teams and return it to their base. Once the stolen headband has been placed somewhere on their base, their point meter will go up. The longer you hold on to others' points, the higher your overall score. Quirk usage is permitted, but only to retrieve the headbands. You will be immediately disqualified if you purposely attack other students with ill intentions. Midnight cracked her whip as the crowd erupted into a frenzy, roaring and cheering at being able to see the students in action against one another. You will have 5 minutes to select your attackers, base and defenders. When the 5 minutes are up, a buzzer will announce the start of the event. Capture the hill will only last a total of 30 minutes, so fear not if you have a bad start. You can qualify if you manage to steal someone's headband at the last second. A deafening roar resounded from the large coliseum as Midnight spun on her heels, basking in the cheering from the crowd. Now that that's out of the way, your 5-minute timer starts now. As the teams scurried off to choose their positions, Izuku closed his eyes and began to rapidly analyze the information of his team. Hatsune-san. Quirk is useful in incredibly niche moments. Virtually useless in an event such as this, but helpful in noticing the finer details of other teams' position and movement. However, her support items could be incredibly useful depending on who gets what item and the role they're in. Gyro-san. Quirk is highly versatile both as a defender and an attacker. However, without her support gear, her abilities are weakened in frontal assaults. More suited for defensive purposes and would tailor well in protecting the base with support gear from Hatsune-san. Tsu-san. Quirk is incredibly flexible in open areas. Tailors very well to guerrilla tactics with incredible agile reflexes and maneuverability. Can play both defensive and offensive roles with ease. Myself. Quirk is flexible and malleable. Can slot defensive purposes if needed but suited more to offensive roles. Flames can be wielded with ease to project barriers and cut off lines of sight. Incredibly oppressive to single targets, but can also cover a wide range with ease to block multiple attackers should the need arise. Does he always mumble like this? Hatsune questioned curiously, watching Izuku stare at the ground blankly as he mumbled under his breath rapidly. The 2 Wanna girls just smiled fondly at the boy as they answered simultaneously. Yes. I've got an idea. Izuku suddenly spoke, breaking out of his mumbling trance. A loud buzzer suddenly roared to life in the arena, announcing that the second event was now underway. If the buzzer wasn't enough, Midnight's lovely voice roared through the arena. Begin. With more than half of the teams being made up of 1B students, most of the eyes zeroed in on Izuku's team to snatch their 10 million points. What's this? Midoriya's score has dropped to 0. What a turn of events. As Present Mike's voice boomed around the arena, Izuku smirked to himself as he held his team's burning headband. He clenched his fist tightly, engulfing the item completely in fire before scattering the ashes on the ground. A bold strategy, but smart. Aizawa's voice droned quietly. By eliminating the greatest score, the teams will now have to focus on one another instead of single targeting a specific team. But will this come back to bite Team Midoriya? Well said, erase your head. Why are you always yelling? Is that even allowed? Nido Monoma cried towards midnight. The R-rated hero pursed her lips for a moment before making a squealing noise and cracking her whip. I'll allow it. Monoma and his classmates squawked in disbelief at the woman's decision. Izuku's smirk only grew before he glanced Tsu's way while nodding his head. Good luck, Tsu-san. Back at you, Midoriya-chan. Without another word, the frog-like girl launched herself towards one of the 1B teams, aiding Todoroki in distracting the defender so he could snatch Kendo's headband. Izuku glanced Gyro's way before conjuring flames along his arms and spewing them towards the girl. With a bit of mental finesse, he commanded the flames to encircle around the girl in a 5-foot radius. A small barrier of fire burned around her, raising towards waist level but showing no signs of spreading. If the flames become too much, then just shout my name, Gyro-san, he yelled before forcing fire through the palms of his hands and taking to the sky. Before taking off to snatch a headband, he stared down at Hatsune before speaking again. Use whatever necessary to make sure no one can put out the fire, Hatsune-san. Mei sported a wicked grin as she hefted some bazooka-looking gadget upon her shoulder. You can count on me. With a simple nod at the girl's words, Izuku took off to find Shinso's team to make sure they wouldn't have points. Deku, what are you thinking? Bakugo's screech was followed by several explosions as the boy matched his flight, following after him to demand a reason. Izuku rolled his eyes, dodging a sudden wave of horn-like objects. His eyes widened for a moment as the horns then seemed to alter their trajectory, circling back around to chase after him. The pyro user shifted on a dime, spinning in midair and using his momentum to send a wave of fire towards the flying projectiles. The horns were rendered into little more than ash a moment later. I'm thinking you should focus on 1B, you idiot, Izuku responded, twisted and turning in air as he neared Shinso's team. Make sure they don't advance and we can fight in the finals. An explosion followed after Izuku's words before Bakugo screamed in response. Fine, don't you dare lose then, Deku. With nary more than an explosion, the rabid blonde teen then blasted himself away, focusing on a 1B team that Momo was easily dismantling. Izuku rolled his eyes at Bakugo's words, sighing to himself and focusing on dealing with the defender of Shinso's team. Several more horns suddenly sped towards him, forcing him to maneuver out of the way lest he be speared by the objects. Snuffing his flames out, Izuku suddenly fell from the sky, cushioning his fall by activating his flames at the last second and using the force from the release of his quirk to soften his landing. Izuku rose a finger towards the defender, a girl from 1B with equestrian features and unique horns atop her head. No hard feelings, yeah? A torrent of flames spewed from Izuku's finger as he commanded his flames to force the girl to dodge. As Pony dove out of the way of the wall of flames, a shocking jolt racked her body, causing her to yelp in pain. The unique vest she was wearing began to glow a solid blue before pulsating with minor electrical shocks, paralyzing the girl from moving. Izuku immediately sped by the girl before focusing on the base. An unassuming boy from 1B who had encased nearly half his body in scales. With nary more than a glance, Izuku swiped the headband off the boy's waist before securing it around his neck and taking to the sky with his flames. He ignored the boy's jeering comments before blasting away. He didn't immediately return to his team, knowing that they wouldn't be a target since they still possessed a grand total of 0 points. Adding points now would just force a 1B team to focus on them. With that in mind, Izuku fastened the 200-point headband around his neck, tying the loose ends to prevent it from being snatched. Do you mind if I snatch these? An unknown feminine voice suddenly resounded from behind Izuku. His eyes widened in surprise as he saw a disembodied hand take a swipe at his headband from his peripherals. He immediately snuffed his flames out, suddenly dropping in altitude and twisting his body to get a good look at the girl who had tried to steal his headband. His eyebrows furrowed at the 1B girl whose entire body was segmented into different parts, all floating and moving around as if they had a mind of their own. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a 300-point headband wrapped tightly around her severed neck. Izuku cushioned his fall with his fire before twisting his gaze around as various different body parts began to surround him. 200 points is 200 points. The admittedly pretty girl giggled playfully, commanding half of her body to reform. As her abdomen, chest, and head resegmented, Izuku took a cursory glance at the floating body parts before rolling his neck. "You're at a disadvantage," he murmured quietly, slowly gliding his feet along the grass while tracking the girl's severed hands. "Am I, though?" she questioned with a grin. "You're surrounded. I can easily distract you long enough to make a swipe for your headband." Izuku scoffed at the girl before raising both of his arms while channeling his flames. "You didn't do your homework, just like you can control your body parts." He proceeded to spin in place before spewing fire from his palms. A tornado of flames suddenly engulfed his body before soaring into the sky and growing larger. A moment later, Izuku commanded the column of rapidly rotating fire to move. "I can control my fire." He stepped out of the rotating vortex of plasma without so much as a single singe on his body or clothes, before commanding the object to race towards Setsuna. The telekinetic body separator yelped in surprise before immediately trying to escape the vortex of death. "Are you trying to kill me?" she screamed in surprise, forcing her body parts to reconnect lest they be turned to ash from the boy's flames. In her haste to escape, the girl managed to trip and fall, back slamming into the turf of the arena. "It'd be relatively easy to kill you, you know," Izuku's voice suddenly resounded from above her, shocking her at the sheer speed he had moved at. The green-haired pyro user sported a wild grin on his face as he pointed his index finger directly at the girl's face. At such a close proximity, Setsuna could feel the immense heat gathering at his fingertips. Her eyes immediately snapped shut as Izuku released the torrent of flames directly in front of her face. A few seconds passed by before Setsuna slowly peeked her eyes open, confused as to why she wasn't a burning corpse on the ground. She blinked several times before glancing down at her neck. "My points," she cried in surprise, shocked that they were suddenly gone. "Better luck next time." Setsuna's eyes snapped upwards, spotting Izuku in the air with her headband wrapped around his neck. She growled in annoyance at the deception before yelling at the boy who was now retreating. "Come back here, give me my points back." "In your dreams," Izuku called out with a laugh. "Now, Todoroki-kun." Setsuna blinked in confusion before a wave of ice suddenly shot along the grass, freezing half her body to the grass and preventing her from moving. "Hey, that isn't fair, you directly attacked me," she cried angrily, separating her waist from her legs due to them being incapacitated. Todoroki immediately sped by the girl as he skated atop his ice, dodging her retaliating swipe with ease. "You can't prove that I wasn't trying to not freeze you. I was merely moving in your direction and you just so happened to be in the way," he responded in a monotone voice, speeding away to follow after Izuku. "Midnight," Setsuna cried. "I'll allow it," the busty woman responded a moment later. "You are still capable of competing and therefore no harm, no foul." "That's bullshit." The girl's upper body vibrated in aggravation. "Language," Midnight roared back, cracking her whip threateningly. What a beautiful display of deception and power. Midoriya manages to outmaneuver Takage and snatch her headband. Present Mike practically screamed into the mic, causing a roaring cheer from the crowd. With both headbands, he now possesses a total of 500 points. In turn, Team Kendo and Team Shinso now sport 0 points. They need to act quick if they wish to make the finals. Aizawa mumbled in a disinterested manner. "Speak up, erase your head. We can't hear you." "No." Izuku chuckled to himself as he lowered himself to the ground, still flying with his flames. Todoroki caught up a moment later, sporting a headband wrapped around his own neck that sported 165 points. Good cover, Todoroki-kun, Izuku complimented before flipping towards the ground and rolling along the soil. Coming to a stop, he stood to his feet before surveying the area. Several of the 1B teams now sported 0 points and were being forced on the offensive to try to gather their stolen points. Todoroki slid to a stop beside his friend, deactivating his ice with nary more than a passing thought. Which team is taking the fall? Izuku grimaced at his friend's words. Most likely Shoji-san's team. They've been stalling the 1B teams and haven't made a move to get actual points. What if they manage to tie points with the 4th place team? Todoroki proposed. I don't think the values add up like that. Izuku mumbled as he gazed up at the screen with furrowed brows. He pursed his lips at the different point values of each team before humming. Well, I could burn up another headband and force a tie to happen. But that can cause more trouble for 1A as we try to swap headbands and values to make the last team qualify. Far too risky, Todoroki muttered while scanning the arena. Both Yaoyorozu and Bakugo's team were now playing more defensively, preventing attackers from getting close to their teams. He glanced up towards at the large screen in the arena, noting that only 15 minutes had ultimately passed since the start of the event. We have time to kill. When are you banking your points? Izuku glanced towards his team's side, noting that Hatsune-san was taking her defensive job a bit too seriously. Several unique-looking gadgets were spread around the barrier of fire he created around Gyro. Granted, the barrier of fire was ultimately unneeded considering he wasn't planning on banking his points yet, but protecting Gyro since she was the base was imperative. Probably in the last minute or so, he murmured, watching as Bakugo set off an explosive flash that practically blinded everyone in a 20-meter radius. He's so obnoxious. Todoroki glanced towards his team, noticing that 4 attackers were now surrounding Kaminari, who shot off short electrical streams to prevent their advances on Mainta. Worry about it in the finals. The Icefire user stated nonchalantly, I need to help my team. The dual quirk user was off not a moment later, skating his way towards his team to prevent their points from being snatched. Izuku watched his friend skate off before gazing around the arena once more and stuffing his hands into his gun pockets. 10 minutes passed by in a breeze as Izuku avoided direct combat with other students, choosing to stay far out of reach near one of the arena walls. With 5 or so minutes left during this event, Izuku wasn't worried. Momo's team was currently in first place with Bakugo's team trailing behind. Todoroki's team was in third and, theoretically, once Izuku banked his own points, their team would be in fourth. It seemed this event was going to be a breeze. His eyes narrowed upon noticing a rather tall figure began to slowly make their way towards him. Said figure possessed familiar gravity defying purple hair. You. Izuku mumbled in annoyance as Shinso came to a stop a few meters away. You really think you have the ability to swipe my points? An arrogant smirk bloomed on Shinso's face as he spoke. I do. Want to see how? Flames began to coat Izuku's arms as he started to move towards Shinso. Yes, actually IW. Izuku's body stopped moving as his brain suddenly felt foggy. What's happening? Why can't I move? Izuku mentally questioned, beyond confused as to why his body wasn't reacting. Ha ha, ha ha ha, Shinso began to laugh. Way too easy. The purple-haired boy wiped an imaginative tear from his face before holding his hand out towards the pyro user and speaking once more. Give me your points. Izuku thought he knew what shame felt like. He was a teenager after all, and everyone knows that you don't make the best decisions when transitioning into adulthood. He'd always been told that actions have consequences, and he'd always believed that to be the truth. The Usj incident made that abundantly clear. What Izuku was unprepared for, however, was realizing that failure and success went hand in hand. In order to rise, you must first fall. In order to succeed, you must first fail. And fail, he most certainly did. Stupid, stupid, stupid. he quietly raged at himself, scratching viciously at the sides of his head to alleviate his frustration. How could I have been so stupid? Tears of anger swelled in his eyes, but he refused to allow them to fall. In doing so, he'd only succumb to that fleeting rage and sadness that nestled within his chest. Where had it all gone wrong? He'd been so confident in himself and his teammates. They were guaranteed to pass. All they had to do was bide their time. And yet he had failed his team. He wanted to scream, to shout and rage, combust in flames and lay waste to the resting room he had been granted. Oh, it was so tempting. So very tempting to just start flinging plasma from his fingertips. But he was better than that. Izuku wasn't a child, but he certainly felt like one now. A sniveling, angry child that knew nothing. His hands trembled, temperature nearly skyrocketing as flames wafted off his hands, ready to incinerate the room he'd been granted to rest in. His brief anger and rage plummeted as the door to his room slowly opened, followed by several familiar voices. "Hey Midoriya, you all right in here?" Gyro asked softly, head peeking into the room. "We wanted to check in you. You kinda ran off after the second round ended." She winced at the hot waves of air in the room, knowing that Izuku had been seconds away from exploding. Izuku glanced at his teammate and felt his anger ebb away into shame. With that ever-increasing feeling of uselessness, his flames died down to nothing. "Gyro-san," he spoke quietly, refusing to make eye contact. "I'm all right." The door scrapped along the floors, followed by Tsu's voice. "You don't have to lie to us, Midoriya-chan. You know we don't blame you, right?" A quiet sigh left Izuku's lips as his teammates entered the room. How could you not?" His voice, though quiet, was laced with frustration. "We lost because of me." To Izuku's surprise, it was Mei that spoke in his defense. "It happens. Ya win some, ya lose some. Ya can't win every time, ya know? What matters is ya tried and failed. What would hurt more, trying and failing, or not trying at all?" Gyro turned to the pink-haired girl, eyebrows furrowed. "That's surprisingly mature of you." Mei just smiled. "I fail a lot when making my babies. It's all a part of the process. It just makes the end goal feel all the more better when you finally get it right." Izuku took the words at face value, shaking his head. "All I had to do was secure my points. Instead, I let my emotions get the better of me. That's twice so far. What happens when I—" He stopped himself short, not bothering to finish the sentence. Tsu croaked quietly, taking a seat next to Izuku as she spoke. "We've talked about this already, Midoriya-chan. We're here to learn. Mistakes are going to happen." An adorable ribbit left her lips as she poked his left cheek. "We failed, Midoriya-chan, not you. Why do you have to shoulder all the blame?" Izuku let the frog-like girl do as she pleased. "Because it was ultimately my fault. I could have just banked the points." "I think you're being too hard on yourself," Gyro said with a sigh, hopping up onto the adjacent table to sit down. "I mean, were you even aware of what Shinso's quirk could do?" Izuku's eyes fell to the floor as he sighed. "No. You can't win a battle you didn't prepare for," Tsu said with a croak. "How were you supposed to know he had a mind control quirk?" On habit, Izuku muttered quietly, explaining the boy's quirk. "It isn't mind control technically. I was still cognitive and aware of my surroundings. I just couldn't control my body and its actions. It's more like brainwashing. The activation was likely when I responded to his question, and that's also an exploitable weakness of his quirk. I wonder how advanced it is. Can it make you do anything? Or is it just simple commands that don't require high brain activity? What a lethal quirk if you're unprepared." He was silent for a few moments before hearing Gyro's quiet snickers. His head snapped up, eyeing the girl with a betrayed expression. "I'm sorry," she giggled again, covering her grinning face. "It's just so funny seeing you geek out over a new quirk. You're such a quirk nerd, Midoriya." "Yes, laugh at my pain." he muttered quietly, face scrunching up like a petulant child. Well, at least his team also didn't pass, Sue croaked with a smile. It really did become an all-class one of finals, after all. May released a pitiful groan at the reminder. I would have loved to advertise my babies for all the world to see. I'd have had so many investors, can you imagine it? All those businessmen lining up and offering me jobs? Oh, the babies I could have been making. Each of the class 1 students looked at the girl oddly, slightly amused at her unique personality. So, what actually happened, Midoriya? Did you burn the headband on purpose or? Gyro asked curiously, having no idea what had actually happened due to her being the base. Izuku released an annoyed sigh as he wrung his fingers together. Shinso's quirk may have prevented my body from reacting, but that doesn't mean it prevents my mind from working. My fire works the way it does because I'm in a spur. The 3 girls made curious faces at his explanation. What's an spur? Gyro questioned with a tilt of the head. Izuku didn't immediately respond, which slightly surprised his 2 classmates, while May just continued to stare, curious at what his answer was going to be. An espur is, by definition, someone with extrasensory perception abilities. He explained lightly. So, you're like a psychic? Sue croaked quietly. But your quirk revolves around fire, doesn't it? How would that work? Gyro asked with a raised eyebrow. Unless that's not what your quirk actually is. Izuku debated on explaining his actual quirk before thinking better of it. It is, kind of. All that you really need to know is that it functions similarly to those who have psychic-based quirks. Fun fact actually, I have more in common with someone who can use telekinesis than someone like Todoroki. What? Gyro asked, baffled. You both use fire. How are you more similar to someone moving things with their mind? She paused for a moment before her mouth opened quietly. Oh, that makes so much sense actually. Hold on, back up, May questioned, confused by the students' byplay due to not being in the know with Izuku. You control fire, yeah, with your mind? Izuku nodded his head quietly. I assume you also create this fire? Like, with your mind? Again, Izuku nodded quietly. May made a face as she asked her next question. So, technically speaking, you can create other things then? Izuku looked reluctant to answer that question, which made May, and by proxy, Sue and Gyro more curious. The green-haired teen just sighed, shaking his head. When I first discovered my quirk, the only thing I could create at the time was fire. My mother has a quirk that allows her to pull small objects towards her, similar to someone who can use telekinesis. My father has a quirk that allows him to breathe fire. The girls didn't bother commenting about how he said the word father, understanding and realizing that the boy did not have a good relationship with the man. So, all that being said, it was originally theorized by my doctor that I could create and control fire by using my mind in a similar manner that my mother does with her own quirk. My quirk is registered as psychoheliokinesis, but it isn't entirely correct, he explained lightly. Heliokinesis is the ability to generate and manipulate plasma or solar energy. It's also said that those same individuals can manipulate all aspects revolving around the sun, like simulating immense heat, manipulating luminosity, and even controlling raw nuclear energy. May explained with a raised eyebrow. You can manipulate plasma, can't you? Izuku sighed as he answered. Let me preface my answer with the fact that I am not a scientist, nor am I educated in any field whatsoever. All I have to go on are the random Google searches I've made the last few years to pinpoint what exactly my quirk does, which, obviously, is not a lot to go off on. However, to answer your question, I can manipulate plasma, but it is a far cry from the real thing. He leaned back against the table, staring up at the ceiling as he continued. I've researched all I could about plasma, solar energy, matter, etc. Eventually, it all just sorta stops making sense. Like I said, I'm not educated in the degree of science that it would take to fully understand and explain how my quirk functions. I've bounced between solar manipulation, plasma manipulation, pyrokinesis. At the end of the day, I can do a lot of things with my mind pertaining to heat and energy. The three girls were silent for a bit, impressed at just how complex Izuku's quirk seemed to be. Man, no wonder you get intense headaches. Gyro mumbled as she tried to wrap her head around the boy's quirk. Is that why you only use fire? Because it's the one you're the most familiar with? You know, assuming you can do the other things that Hatsu mentioned. Izuku shrugged his shoulders as he answered. Fire is the easiest. I've used it for so long now that I've practically mastered it. I'm actually surprised it took this long for someone to point out. I've created quite a bit of explosions with my quirk and no one said anything. Pure fire isn't capable of causing explosions because there isn't anything to stimulate the flames to expand rapidly. Adding more fire to fire won't really do anything because they're made of the same genetic makeup. An explosion, by definition, is any kind of matter that's been rapidly expanded, usually due to high temperature and the release of high-pressure gases. More fire just means, well, more fire. Sue made a croaking sound as she responded. I originally thought you were just causing the flames to combust and then science caused the explosions. But that makes a lot more sense. All this science talk is rotting my brain. Gyro mumbled as she laid down on the table. You also didn't answer my question. We got sidetracked. Izuku mumbled an apology before answering. I panicked and conjured my flames on instinct, causing them to burn the headband. That's the gist of it. Really? Again, I'm sorry we failed. It's all right, dude, Gyro said with a shake of her head. Honestly, we aren't blaming you. It was a perfectly normal reaction. I'd go so far as to say that it was a good thing it happened. Had Shinso caught me with the points, then we'd still be here, but they'd be in the finals. Sue croaked with a shrug. There's always next year. Babies will be made regardless, May said seriously, before adopting a thinking pose. Now that I have a better grasp of your quirk, I could possibly create a baby specifically tailored for you, Izuku. Izuku glanced at the girl before sighing quietly, too bummed out at waving her idea away. Why, yeah? Unless you can make me something that eases my migraines, I'm not sure how you can increase the usability of my quirk. Leave that to me, she exclaimed with a giddy giggle, pulling out a large piece of blueprint paper from somewhere. She smacked it onto the table before rapidly scribbling designs and numbers and words that only she understood. She's almost as bad as you are, Midoriya. Gyro teased with a grin, glancing at the blueprint paper with a raised eyebrow. The hastily drawn picture of the baby resembled some kind of sci-fi futuristic helmet thing. She kind of pitied Izuku now. Hopefully the thing wouldn't potentially fry his brain. Shut up, he mumbled childishly. Cheer up, Midoriya-chan, Sue croaked cutely. It'll work out. I'm sure you'll still receive plenty of intern requests. The media rarely lets us forget after all. She none too subtly alluded to the Usik incident. Izuku only groaned louder at the reminder. It's gonna be so much worse, he covered his face as he groaned once more. I can just see the memes now. I won't be able to live this down. Beacon of hope. More like beacon of nope. I want to die. His two classmates giggled at his expense while May continued her work, obsessively at that. There was a brief lull of silence before a quiet knock emanated from the door. Following that knock was a muffled voice, one belonging to Momo. Can we come in? Izuku furrowed his eyebrows at the wee comment, but didn't think further on it. Why ye? He muttered loud enough for the group outside to hear. The knob twisted, and Izuku nearly blanches at seeing all of his classmates from Class 1 lingering at the door. Even Bakugo was there. Well, kind of. He looked pissed off, but when didn't he look angry? He had probably been dragged against his will, all things considered. Mainta looked uncomfortable, all things considered, and Izuku couldn't really blame him. He very nearly maimed the poor kid. He didn't hate the little perv, but he also didn't like the way he looked at and talked to the girls of the classroom. They needed to talk to one another at some point. Wow. Why are you all here? Izuku questioned. To check up on you, Momo stated in an obvious manner. Yeah, Mina piped up, sashaying past Momo to make her way into the room. You didn't seem all that happy, so we came to give you hugs and kisses. She then proceeded to make obnoxious kissing noises, fit with pouty lips and over-the-top smooches. TCH, speak for yourself. Bakugo grumbled, not bothering to enter the room like the rest of his classmates. I wanted to know why you decided to dodge our fight in the finals. Izuku's tired expression quickly morphed to anger as he slowly sat up on the table. You're so lucky I burnt that headband. If we actually faced off against one another, you'd be crying to Auntie Mitsuki. Your mom's weeping right now, ya shitter, Bakugo snapped back, growling in annoyance. Say that shit to my face, Izuku challenged back angrily, nearly jumping off the table before being restrained, quite easily, by Momo. Both of you, shut up, Momo demanded, glaring at Bakugo as she physically willed Izuku back down into the table. You're not going to solve anything by fighting here. Bakugo scoffed in annoyance before shoving his hands in his pockets and walking away. Maybe next time you won't be such a damn disappointment. All that tough talk just to get eliminated before the finals. Izuku's flames nearly roared to life, but Todoroki's ice cooled that before it could even happen. It left Izuku feeling even more frustrated. Why are you always cooling me down? Izuku questioned his friend with great annoyance. Shoto quietly shrugged his shoulders, removing his hand from Izuku. You always stoop to his level. It's unnecessary. You're a better person than he is. Izuku merely grumbled, turning away with a quiet sigh. Am I, though? Some of us believe so. Momo answered curtly, releasing her hold on Izuku and causing him to frown at her tone. You have inspired everyone to grow stronger, to try harder, and to be better. Your speech at the start of the event even swayed a lot of the other classes to give it their all. Izuku glanced at the taller girl before shifting his gaze to his classmates and seeing their encouraging smiles and nods. He was quiet for a moment before bowing his head with a tired sigh. Gee, good luck, all of you. He turned his head towards Shoji and Ajiro's team before bowing his head once more. Because of me, your teams held no points. I'm sorry for wasting your sacrifice. Aoyama offered an uneasy smile while bowing back to Izuku. Quite all right, Mon Ami. I'll have a chance to twinkle another time. Zero shrugged his shoulders as he replied, All good, dude. The giant masked teen merely shrugged his shoulders. It's all right, Midoriya-san. There is always next year after all. The tailed teen merely waved Izuku's apology away. Koda-san and I agreed to just block 1B the entire time. We didn't mind being in the back seat for this event. The shy and normally silent Koda merely nodded his head, supporting Ajiro's words. Still, Izuku insisted, I've let you guys down. It looked as if many around wanted to voice their disagreements, but were prevented from doing so due to Momo's next words. Is it okay with all of you if Izuku and I continue this conversation in private? She pivoted on her heel, glancing at her classmates who obliged with the girl's request. One by one, the students of 1A and Mei offered Izuku their goodbyes, and in turn, he offered them his support in the finals. Once every student had passed the threshold of the door and Momo was confident they had left, she turned to Izuku, an indescribable look in her eye. Did you mean? She paused for a moment, seemingly to gather her thoughts. Did you mean what you said? That night when, did you mean it? Izuku furrowed his brows, taking a seat on top of one of the tables. Why, you'll need to be a bit more specific, Momo. A lot happened that night, and I said a lot of things. We both did. The girl looked uncomfortable for a moment, grasping onto her left arm with her right and avoiding Izuku's gaze. About. Being my hero. Did you? Did you really mean it? That you believe in me, despite everything? Everything. Did you really mean it? Of course I did, Momo. Izuku immediately insisted, wanting to dissuade the girl's worries and insecurities. I'll always be there for you when you need me. A dash of pink painted the girl's cheeks at his words. It again, Momo mumbled in embarrassment. Izuku leaned closer towards the girl, unable to hear what she had said. I couldn't hear you, Momo. Can you repeat that? The buxom teen mumbled unintelligibly for a moment before whispering quietly. See, can you say it again? Izuku's lips parted in slight surprise at the girl's shy demeanor before a soft smile formed on his face. No matter what happens between now and the future, I'll always be here for you, Momo. I promise. Don't make a promise you can't keep, Izuku, Momo stated fiercely, cheeks still burning. The green-haired teen nearly chuckled at the girl's words, but thought better. Then I guess we'll have to never leave each other's side, Momo knew what Izuku was saying, but a part of her interpreted it as something even deeper, more personal. Do you even know what you're implying, Izuku? She questioned with blazing cheeks, unable to even meet Izuku's gaze. Not really, no. He chuckled a bit, scratching at his cheek. But I'll do whatever it takes to have you be by my side. Even if I'm broken and beaten down, clinging to what little life I have, I'll keep getting back up, just for you. At this point, Momo's imagination had gone into a frenzy. Indecent and decidedly unladylike thoughts circulated around her head. With crimson-stained cheeks, Momo placed her hands upon her face while shaking her head from side to side. Izuku couldn't have possibly known what he was doing to the girl. He possessed little experience with social interactions with girls his age and couldn't be blamed for how sincere and serious his words may or may not potentially be. For Momo, who had been in an emotionally volatile state for the past 2 years, to have someone boldly state that they'd never leave her side, continue to fight for her sake regardless of the consequences to themselves, all while continuing to insert themselves into her life to be a shoulder to cry on, well, it was no surprise that she'd fall for them. Hard. It certainly didn't help when Izuku spoke once more, cementing the idea to Momo once and for all. I've never been good with my words. The boy started softly. I've usually always let my actions speak for themselves. Izuku glanced up towards the girl, slightly surprised to see that she had closed the distance between them, standing but a foot in front of him, gazing intently into his eyes. The half-lidded gaze in Momo's eyes caused a bit of anxiety to flood into Izuku's veins, but this particular anxiety wasn't completely unwelcomed. It was almost like there was butterflies in his stomach. Izuku swallowed the saliva in his mouth, bulling forward despite the intense gaze in Momo's eyes. I truly did mean what I said to you, Momo. I want to help you. A moment of silence passed between the teens before the girl responded. And if I can't help myself? What then, Izuku? She questioned with a tilted head, leaning closer to the boy. Izuku shook his head at her words. I already told you. I won't leave your side, even if you try to push me away. Momo's voice was quiet, nearly a whisper as she stepped closer towards Izuku's seated position. And what if I'm too weak? What if I fail? What then, Izuku? A blush crept up Izuku's face due to the close proximity, but he pushed forward, knowing that Momo needed to hear these words. Everyone fails, Momo, Izuku mumbled, eyes straying away from the girl. Despite knowing and understanding that concept, he himself still struggled with accepting it. But not everyone has someone by their side, encouraging them to continue forward, pushing them to continue bettering themselves. With a small smile, he gazed into the girl's eyes while continuing. You're not weak, Momo. Far from it, actually. I don't know a single person who can physically go toe-to-toe with you when you get serious. You're strong, Momo. I just want you to see that. If you could see yourself from my point of view, then I'm positive you'd understand how I feel about you." Izuku was unprepared for Momo to lean even closer. Foreheads gently tapping against one another, charcoal eyes gazing into emerald. "And how do you feel about me?" she whispered. Izuku's lips parted multiple times, words failing to come to him. Those butterflies in his stomach were now in a frenzy. He could feel Momo's breath upon his lips, and as his thoughts began to spiral towards indecency, Momo spoke once more. "I think I know how I feel about you," she said in a coy demeanor, lips quirking into a small smirk as Izuku's face began to flush crimson. Time seemed to almost freeze between the two teens as they stared into one another's eyes. Warm breath tickling one another's lips, racing hearts and feelings of nervousness and excitement bubbling forth, seemingly ready to burst forward. All it would take was a simple dip of the head. From who? Perhaps it would forever remain a mystery as the two teens were interrupted by present Mike's voice blasting over the intercom. And we're back, folks. Are you all as excited as I am to watch the finals of the annual a sports festival? He paused for a moment, and it allowed Izuku and Momo to separate as the cheers and shouts resounded from the stadium. Will all contestants make their way to the stadium for introductions? Let's get this show rockin'. With crimson-stained cheeks, unable to meet one another's eyes, the two WANA students remained silent, not knowing how to continue forward upon their intimate moment being interrupted. "Gee, good luck, Momo," Izuku stuttered, eyes trained on the floor. I believe in you." Thank you," the girl squeaked out quietly, dithering in place for a moment as if unsure of what to say or do. I'm gonna go by." The girl flashed a bright pink before disappearing in a burst of speed, almost invisible to the naked eye. Izuku sat frozen, confused, nervous, excited, and so many more emotions he couldn't hope to grasp and understand. Had they been moments away from kissing? He'd never been in a situation like this with a girl before. Sure, Ashido would tease and flirt with him all the time to get a rise out of him, but that had been the real deal. Was he supposed to ask her out now? Or something to that effect? It seemed like Momo had been the one to initiate the interaction, so maybe. Izuku slapped his burning cheeks, shaking his head back and forth to try to center himself. His first crush. Truly, his life could only go up from here. Standing up to make his way towards the stadium, he stopped upon hearing his phone began to ring. He glanced at the caller ID, furrowing his eyebrows at the fact his mom was calling before answering her. "Hey Mom, what's up?" "Think again, kid." A deep, menacing voice answered Izuku, causing adrenaline to surge through the boy's veins. His pupils dilated, heart beating faster than his near kiss with Momo. "Who is this?" he demanded fiercely, clutching his phone tight enough to crack it. "Saw your little speech today at the festival." The man spoke casually, almost in an aloof manner. "Moved me something fierce, I tell ya." "Where's my mom?" Izuku spoke harshly, slowly. Ot. The man chided calmly, as if he was a parent speaking to their naughty child. "I wasn't finished, little man. You know it's rude to interrupt people when they're talking, don't ya?" Izuku's body began to shake in rage, crimson flames forming around his body due to his volatile emotional state. "As I was saying, your speech really moved me to my core. I mean, a kid like you trying to shoulder the weight of the world? Gotta say, I'm kinda impressed." He paused, seeming to dither for a moment before pressing a button on his mother's phone, changing their talk into a video chat. "Look, kid, I'm gonna make this real simple for you. Switch to video, I'll show you what you want to see." Izuku snarled before doing what the unknown man said. Upon switching to video chat, his eyebrows furrowed at the scarred face of a relatively young unknown man. "Not even bothering to hide your face?" Izuku questioned with a glare, not recognizing this villain at all. The youngish villain merely smirked at Izuku's words. "Got nothing to hide, kid." The phone's camera began to slowly move, panning across Izuku's apartment before slowly settling upon a bound and gagged Inko. She had tears in her eyes, rope tied around her wrists and ankles as she stared up at the phone. She rocked back and forth on the ground, screams and cries muffled by the duct tape covering her mouth. Izuku's heart nearly sank at the scene, his anger and rage burning out, replaced with a dread unlike anything he'd ever felt before. "Mom!" Izuku screamed, panic overriding his functions. The phone's camera then swung around the apartment, settling back onto the villain's face. "See? She's fine." He paused for a moment, shrugging his shoulders. "Or rather, she will be when we get what we want." Izuku clutched his phone desperately. "What do you want?" "You." Izuku furrowed his eyebrows in genuine confusion. "Me?" "One of my boss associates wants to have a little chat with you. Boss man sent me to make sure you comply." The young man shrugged his shoulders. "Listen, kid, I'm just the middleman. I get contracted to do something, I do it, then I get paid. Unfortunately for you, the woman who paid for the contract is very interested in meeting you. Poor kid, I almost feel bad for ye. She's what we in the business call unstable." Izuku forced himself to try to calm down. He couldn't panic and act without thinking. He'd only get himself and his mother killed. Think. "Who's this woman that wants to meet me?" he asked shakily, trying to mask the dread he felt. An assassin with over 309 confirmed kills, both villain and hero alike. Woman's got no qualms with that rifle of hers. A target is just that for her. Once she has you in her sights, it's game over. "Why me?" Izuku questioned, hoping for any kind of information. "FCK all if I know, kid. I was told to take your mom hostage until you got here." The man shrugged his shoulders, walking around the apartment as if he owned the place. "And before you think of alerting the authorities or speaking to any of those around ya, I want to warn you. Alert M and your mom dies. It ain't personal, kid. It's just business. Come alone." The man then hung up the phone and Izuku wasted no time in racing out of the room, flames wafting around his body as he sped through the halls, intent on reaching his home to prevent anything from happening to his mother. Fear coiled around his heart, squeezing the breath out of him as he flew through the stadium innards. Nothing made sense to him. Why was he being targeted now, of all times? Could it be that this female assassin was a part of the group that attacked them during the Usti incident? If she was, then Izuku couldn't understand her motive. Why now? It wasn't logical. She'd have had plenty of time during this month-long break to enact any kind of revenge she so desired. He also hadn't recognized the man on the phone either, which led Izuku to believe that this incident and the villain group who attacked them during the Usti incident weren't related. It was the only logical conclusion he could come up with. The guy with the hands all over his face with the decaying quirk had, seemingly, been the one calling the shots during the attack. Of course, that'd just be an assumption on Izuku's part, and an assumption at this point could mean potential death. The hand-face guy had been incredibly immature and insane. The way the guy on the phone spoke about this particular woman had Izuku believing that she was a stone-cold killer, and Izuku highly doubted that a contract hitman, possessing a sort of moral enforcer code, would tolerate the mere presence of an apparently immature psycho. She'd probably put a bullet in his head before playing nice. Not to mention that insane body count. 309 confirmed kills. Izuku was racking his brain trying to dredge up any information about a potential villain with a lethal record like that. You didn't get away with an obscene number like that, especially when it came to using guns. Who was this woman? And better yet, why did she want to meet him? None of anything seemed to make sense to Izuku, and he struggled with it all. Lost in his thoughts, Izuku didn't notice the number 2 pro-ranked hero in the hallway, chatting to his son, and nor did he register the fact that he was using his quirk without proper regulation and authority. He blitzed past the man and his son, burning a smoldering trail through the stadium before finally blasting out one of the emergency exits. Taking to the sky, Izuku ignored all the potential consequences of using his quirk in public, intent on saving his mother. What he failed to notice was the number 2 pro-ranked hero, Endeavor, chasing after him on foot. "Did you manage to plant the explosives?" A rather plain-looking, fair-skinned man questioned quietly, looking out into the massive stadium, ignoring the screaming cheers from civilians and heroes alike. A young woman, hair the color of blood, scoffed at his hushed tone. "Come on, what do you take me for? A idiot? Yeah, I planted 'em." She crossed her arms across her chest, glaring out into the stadium. "Shit was harder than I thought it was gonna be. Security down there was tight as a bitch. Nearly got caught 3 times. She clicked her teeth together, side-eyeing her partner. "This shit better be worth it. I don't like getting kids involved." The man frowned at his partner. "Neither do I. But the pay was huge. I couldn't turn it down. I'll set them off, and then we'll be ghost. On a plane to Hawaii like we always wanted." The woman was quiet for a moment, turning her head towards her partner before nodding her head and turning to leave. "I'm not staying to see this shit. Wouldn't be able to sleep at night otherwise. We do terrible things to survive but targeting children. Only place we get to look forward to is hell." After saying her piece, the woman with blood-red hair disappeared down the dark hall. The woman's partner watched her the entire time before fiddling with a cylindrical device in his hands, a detonator of some kind. "Yeah, one last gig." He stared down at the detonator in his hands, ignoring the cheering cries from the stadium. "Allow me to introduce you to our first 2 finalists," President Mike's voice blasted over the arena. "These 2 young women have fought tooth and nail during the event, nearly neck and neck with the previous number 1 contestant until his unfortunately timed exit in the last event. You show too much favoritism." Aizawa spoke quietly into the microphone. He was, of course, completely ignored by his partner and close friend. "Allow me to introduce you to Class 1A's very own powerhouse. She's a sniper that can create any and everything but also possesses a deadly right hook to match. Yaoyorozu Momo." The crowd went absolutely ballistic as the young girl showed up in the arena, a confident and hardened visage upon her features. "No wonder they're paying me so much for this." The man scoffed quietly, walking out of the halls and leaning on the railing in front of him, staring down towards the arena. "A friggin' Yaoyorozu. Shit. And of course, we certainly can't forget about the mean, lean, pink fighting machine with acid so corrosive it could melt through even Eraserhead's stone-cold heart, Ashido Mina." Just as they had done for Momo, the crowd erupted into a frenzy over Mina, clearly being a fan favorite with her bubbly personality. The pink-skinned girl happily shot out of the contestant tunnel, jumping up and down while basking at all the attention and love she was receiving from the frenzied crowd. She gave dozens of kisses to the crowd as she skipped towards the arena, taking in the moment without a care in the world. "Damn it." The man grunted quietly, squeezing the detonator in his hand tightly. "I can't believe I'm going to do this." He closed his eyes, placing his thumb over the switch and staring up into the sky. With introductions out of the way, "Are you ready?" President Mike bellowed out loudly, stirring up the crowd even more. "I can't hear you," he bellowed once more. "I said, are you ready?" If it was even possible, then the crowd somehow got even louder. Thousands upon thousands of feet stomped throughout the stadium, a cacophony of sound assaulting the heavens as the crowd cheered eagerly for the first match to begin. "Then let's get this show going. Finalists, are you ready?" Both of the girls nodded their heads, standing nearly 2 meters away from one another with determined gazes. "Hajime, forgive me for the sins I have committed, for I know not what I do, Father," the man mumbled, turning away from the arena and heading into the tunnels. He pressed down upon the switch. The world slowed down. The chanting, the screaming, the excited atmosphere. Nothing moved for all of 1 second. And then, all hell broke loose. A horrible ringing noise assaulted Momo's ears as she stared into the brownish sky above her. Various shades of black and gray fought for dominance, painting the once vibrant and beautiful sky an ugly and putrid brown. The ringing. By the gods, it was just so. Loud. A vicious wave of nausea and pain raced through her body, causing the young teen to convulse violently. Her body coiled in on itself, arms squeezing together across her torso in a desperate manner to alleviate the sudden pain. What happened? Why was she hurting? What was going on? A spike of pain bashed against her skull, feeling awfully similar to the quirk bestowed upon her by All Might. Confusion. Pain. Anxiety. Momo nearly retched as her emotions collided and twisted, unable to comprehend what was going on. Tears stained her cheeks as she rubbed her face into the rough and coarse concrete, trying desperately to staunch the pain and exhaustion her body was experiencing. Another immense spike of pain raced through her brain, causing a surge of adrenaline to course through her veins. The familiar and honestly welcoming feeling of one for all spread throughout her body. A pink glow manifested around her skin, hugging her body in an ethereal, miasmic mist. Small surges of chaotic and untamed pink energy zapped around her body, almost as if she herself was a conduit for lightning. The pink miasma then quickly settled, sticking to the girl's skin and covering her like a suit of translucent armor. Momo released a quiet sigh of relief, the pain slowly ebbing away. The knots in her stomach unwound and her anxiety slowly settled. The feeling of nausea passed, and with it, a sense of clarity. Move. Momo ignored the spike of pain from her mind, listening to the sudden urge of danger that compelled her to move. Not even a second later did a mutated, ebony fist crater the ground where her head had been, fracturing the concrete with ease and sending chunks of debris flying. Momo's eyes dilated, charcoal pupils bleeding away into pink diamonds. A fresh wave of adrenaline coursed through her body, suddenly aware of everything around her. A look of horror and shock assaulted her features as she came face to face with. "And no, it can't be. No," she whispered manically, terror squeezing her heart. Before her stood the very creature that had nearly killed her entire class during the Usj incident. Its hulking mass of muscles, covered in a litany of angry, red scars flexed in a grotesque manner. Thick, bulging veins nearly protruded through the creature's purple-ish black skin. Unlike before, however, its exposed brain was no longer uncovered. In its place was an odd-looking helmet that covered nearly the entirety of the monster's head, leaving only the beast's bird-like mouth exposed. Momo took a step back in fear, knees on the verge of shaking as she stared at this genetic monstrosity. She didn't, or rather couldn't, comprehend the pandemonium that was happening in the arena as she stared at the artificially enhanced Nomu. Civilians and heroes alike were tossed in a frenzy as nearly a dozen of genetically altered Nomus came bursting towards the crowds from the explosion, relentlessly targeting anything that moved. Screams of pure terror and fear assaulted the sky as the heroes in the crowd immediately tried to intervene and protect the fleeing civilians. Dozens upon dozens of unique quirks were tossed around between heroes and Nomus alike, racking up a sizable amount of casualties due to the enclosed space of the arena. Due to tunnel vision, Momo was, blissfully, ignorant to this. She stood, enraptured by terror, as the Usjinamu turned its gaze upon her. Her knees shook, fear preventing her from moving and acting. She dared not to blink. A blink meant danger. Momo ignored the spike of pain in her head as the Usjinamu seemingly disappeared. She knew, at least on a surface level, that the creature had blurred towards her. Under normal circumstances, she'd have even been able to dodge and launch a devastating retaliation strike. However, her fear and anxiety at seeing the monster she had gunned down multiple times, nearly witnessing the deaths of two of her closest friends due to this thing, and her overwhelming sense of inferiority stayed her hand, dulling her senses. The only thing Momo could do in that moment was instinctively raise her arms up, shielding her face from a blow that would have potentially ripped her head off her shoulders. The impact from the creature's fist was unlike anything she had experienced before. Even All Might himself had never hit her so hard. The sheer force from the Ustjanamu's punch had sent Momo flying into one of the arena walls, cratering a good portion of the arena with it. A plume of smoke, filled with debris and dust, rocketed towards the sky. A massive shockwave assaulted the arena from the sheer force of the Nomus attack, briefly pausing all chaos for a single moment. Not a moment later did it resume and continue, but the attack clearly spoke for itself. This particular Namu was clearly a different kind of threat than the ones currently wreaking havoc in the arena stands. If this Namu was to abandon the arena floor in favor of causing destruction in the stands, then there was truly no hope for the heroes who were combating and protecting the civilians in the crowd. Nothing save for All Might himself would be able to match this thing, and instinctively, each and every hero in the crowd seemed to recognize and understand this fact. Uncertainty and anxiety nestled in the heroes' hearts, but they continued to carry out their duties. Those that could combat the Nomus did so, and those that could evacuate and protect the civilians did so with their lives, sacrificing themselves so another could continue on living. It was, perhaps, a losing battle. While not even 3 minutes had passed by since the first explosion, the casualties were already unacceptable. Without a miracle, today would be nothing more than a slaughter. A pair of crimson, narrow eyes stared down at the pandemonium with distaste, defined eyelashes moving in tandem with her slow blinks. Muscular arms and legs slowly flexed and stretched as chaos unraveled below her. Rumi Yusujama, better known to the public as the number 5 pro hero, Merco, stretched her muscles in her private suite as she prepared to aid the heroes against this unknown attack. She had originally came to UA's annual event on a whim, hearing from one of her handlers about a certain group of teens that had caused quite a stir with the media when facing down a certain group of villains. Rumi didn't care about the little details. She knew about the infamous Usti incident, and she herself was familiar with the cold feeling of death at a young age, like the children mentioned. The only reason she had come here was to watch those 3 specific kids in action. She had been, thus far, relatively unimpressed by their performance, but that wasn't necessarily their fault. Rumi was an adrenaline junkie, and she knew it. If it wasn't about fighting or explosions, she didn't really give a rat's ass. The U, a sports festival, lacked that very thing. Or rather, in the early stages it did. She had finally started to feel something once the 3rd event had been announced, eagerly wanting to see how the 3 teens would react when in combat with another. She was, however, disappointed upon seeing the green-haired boy eliminate himself. He was the one that she had had her eyes on from the beginning. She had seen his face everywhere. Memes, news articles, videos. It didn't matter what kind of media you consumed, you knew this kid or had even heard about him. A temper that rivaled her own when seemingly pushed far enough, and a fiery quirk that complemented that temper. Oh yes, Rumi wasn't ashamed to admit that she had been very interested in the boy and his 2 classmates. Upon seeing him in person, she had been relatively disappointed. The boy appeared to be nervous and anxiety-ridden, but when wielding that quirk, he became a different person, all the more interesting to Rumi. But that was neither here nor there now that the arena was under attack. Rumi's long, white hair cascaded down her back as she continued to stretch her muscles, mood soured at having her personal time interrupted by some unknown group of villains, hoping to make some kind of ridiculous statement. Bunch of morons, she muttered quietly, flexing her incredibly impressive physique. Cracking her neck from side to side, the rabbit-themed pro-hero stalked forward, eyes shooting down to the arena. Beady red eyes focused on the monstrous-looking Namu as it sprang forward, intent on crushing that young girl that Rumi had a self-veiled interest in. She was briefly surprised that the girl had managed to block the initial attack, knowing how fast that creature had to be in order to pull off that kind of power and force. She ignored the vicious shockwave that erupted from the attack, barely blinking as the glass surrounding her personal suite suddenly shattered, raining down glass shards upon her. Rumi's muscular thighs coiled and flexed as she bent low, eyeing the transformed human abomination with manic glee. This was bound to be entertaining. Her adrenaline was singing to her. Her blood was flowing, and she was feeling the high. Fight, 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 fight. Her blood sang at the prospect of matching blows with something that possessed strength on par with All Might himself. Ought to be fun. I hope you don't disappoint me. Rumi then rocketed towards the arena floor, destroying the private suite with her incredible strength. An impressive shockwave cratered the ground as she blitzed the unsuspecting creature, its focus on the crowd. Luna Arc. The impact of her axe kick caused a massive shockwave to assault the arena, briefly garnering the attention of heroes and Nomu alike as the entire arena quaked from her enhanced strength. Rumi grinned in excitement as her heels smashed down upon the hulking monster. Its giant frame seemed to crumble in on itself as its ugly face became intimate with the concrete ground. "Oi, oi, oi," she taunted from above, grinding her foot down upon the creature's neck when it didn't immediately retaliate or move. "Don't tell me you're dead now. We haven't even gotten started yet." Rumi had no idea, of course, that she had completely annihilated the monster's spinal cord, crushed its ribcage and heart while simultaneously destroying the bones in both of its legs with her absurd kick. While the genetically mutated Nomu possessed super regeneration, an attack of that magnitude would give any creature pause. Rumi tilted her head, feeling movement beneath her, before suddenly kicking off the monster's neck, avoiding the sudden retaliation swipe. She flipped multiple times in the air, landing nimbly on her toes with an insane grin on her face. "I felt nearly all your bones break, big boy." She laughed roughly, grin splitting her features. "You gonna show me a good time or not?" The hulking monster slowly rose to its full height, bones snapping and cracking back in place. Sickening cracks and grotesque crunches emanated from the Nomu as its spinal cord straightened itself out, broken neck snapping back in place like a loose spring. Its helmeted gaze slowly turned on Rumi as the rest of its injuries regenerated with ease. Rumi's grin only grew larger at the sight. All of her muscles coiled and flexed, bulking up at the knowledge that they'd get a decent use today. "I can't wait to shit down your throat," she laughed in an obnoxious manner before suddenly disappearing, blurring out of sight before reappearing beside the creature. Her right leg flashed out, fast as lightning, connecting with the Nomu's jaw and sending it tumbling away with a powerful shockwave. She blurred once more, reappearing above it with both of her feet angled slightly above the monster's sternum. Luna Fall. A vicious shockwave exploded outwards from the impact, sending the genetic creature rocketing nearly 2 meters down into the concrete. The entire arena shook and quaked due to the sheer strength of Merco's vicious assault. With a renewed vigor at seeing someone as powerful as Merco stepping up to the powerful Nomu, the heroes in the crowd continued forward, confident that the number 5 pro hero could at least stall or hopefully defeat the genetic abomination. Pain. It was the only thing Momo could understand at this very moment. Her arms, her head, her back. Everything. All of it. Pain, pain, pain. She'd never felt this much pain in her entire life. Not even her light spars with All Might using 50% of his power had been this painful. She couldn't even feel her arms, and she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. Come to think about it, she couldn't really feel anything. Other than the all-encompassing pain, of course. And she couldn't even see. Why couldn't she see? Or move? Why couldn't she move? Was she paralyzed and blind? Or worse? Was she dead? Not quite, little one. A feminine voice suddenly states, surprising and shocking Momo. 3 long years and you've never once bothered to check up on us. It's funny considering she uses my quirk the most. A male voice replied in amusement. That's not fair, Hickage. Your quirk is passive and doesn't take any form of training to utilize. The previous woman spoke once more, whining as if she was a young child. You never used it, Nana. The man named Hickage retorted easily, a very obvious smile on his face. The woman known as Nana grumbled like a spoiled child. None of us were able to wield each other's quirks, and then she comes along and does it with ease. She is an obvious outlier in that regard. Another male voice suddenly spoke up. She wields the power with relative ease, but fights an internal battle with her mind. Save it, Yoichi. A rough male voice spoke, replying to the previous man's words. I don't accept her. She's weak. His tone became acidic, and despite not having a physical body, Momo still cringed at the man's words. You are being far too harsh, Kudo. Yoichi spoke up in Momo's defense. She is a young woman, tasked with the weight of the world on her shoulders. You cannot expect a child to shoulder your past burdens. Had we been stronger, she wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. Another unnamed man made a scoffing sound, replying to Yoichi. Kids these days are spoon-fed and can't hope to fend for themselves. He spat before continuing harshly. She needs to grow up if she wants to be of any use to us. You're scaring the poor girl, Bruce. A quiet man spoke up, sounding muffled to some degree. Not everyone grew up in a war-torn society, forced to fend for themselves against superpowered humans, high on unregulated quirk laws and enhancement drugs. The quiet man then spoke softly, as if directly communicating with Momo. Hello, Yaoyorozu-san. You may call me in. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Momo was both scared and confused. Was she going insane? What the hell was going on? Just a moment ago, she'd been staring into the eyes of death itself. Now she was hearing voices in her head. Nana chuckled at the girl's thoughts. Here, love, let me help you. She spoke kindly, like a mother to her child. Muffled footsteps echoed quietly before Momo felt a gloved hand graze along her face. With that gentle touch, Momo's eyes finally opened. What she saw only confused and surprised her even more. Standing, or rather sitting, before her was 7 individuals that she didn't recognize. Well, 5 of them were sitting while 2 of them chose to stand, staring at a dilapidated wall like 2 children in trouble. We heard that, you little shit, both men shouted at the same time, causing Momo's eyes to widen in surprise. They could hear her thoughts. Yes. The woman known as Nana answered with a smile. She was a beautiful and muscular woman, possessing a small mole below her lip. Don't let those 2 meatheads back there intimidate you. The 2 men facing the wall only grumbled quietly, otherwise not rising to the obvious taunt from Nana. It's nice to finally meet you, Momo-chan. The woman greeted warmly, a large smile not unlike All Might's upon her face. She would have liked to ask what the heck was going on, but she physically couldn't. So, using her analytical mind, Momo tried to determine what was actually going on. You got knocked out, kiddo. The final unnamed individual spoke boisterously. Took a mean left hook and got embedded into a wall. Kinda rough, honestly. He laughed in his ornate chair before waving towards the girl. Yo, Degoro Banjo at your service, better known as former pro hero Lariat. She doesn't know you. And responds quietly and politely. Stop saying better known as. I'd be surprised if anyone in her age group knew you. Quiet you, Banjo fired back, twisting in his chair to point directly at the high-collared N. Knocked out? With 1 punch. To be fair, you were cowering for your life. Banjo retorted with a smile, adjusting his odd-looking goggles upon his bald head. One look at that genetic freakazoid and your knees were shaking. Momo-san has every right to be afraid. Yoichi spoke in her defense once more. That thing has been genetically altered and seems to possess multiple quirks. He was quiet for a moment, placing his elbows on his knees before leaning forward, covering his mouth with his hands, and there's only one person with the capability of producing something like that. He shook his head in disdain, white locks of hair jostling about. Multiple quirks, a pit of despair and dread nestled deep within Momo's bosoms. That overwhelming feeling of fear and terror resurfaced with a vengeance as her thoughts continued to spiral downward. "Hey, hey, hey," Nana soothingly whispered, caressing the young girl's face with both of her gloved hands. "Look at me," she calmly stated, managing to direct Momo's attention upon her instead of her thoughts. "We know it's scary and we know it's selfish, but you are our hope, Momo-chan. There's no need to rush. One foot in front of the other. We tackle what we can before moving forward, yeah?" Momo wanted to cry, but couldn't due to not actually having an actual physical body in this weird realm they were in. All for One was truly alive then. Just the thought caused an uncontrollable wave of anxiety to flood her veins. How could someone like that still be alive after facing a prime all might? It didn't make sense. Cockroaches tend to survive whatever gets thrown at them. Hickage muttered quietly, leaning back in his seat while placing one leg over the other. He scratched at the odd-looking scar upon his face, speaking once again. "We have time. Perhaps not a lot of it, but some is always better than none. One step at a time," Nana reminded soothingly, pulling away from the young girl before placing an arm around the girl's shoulder and slowly guiding her closer towards the previous users of One for All. "Right now, that creature is being distracted by a powerful hero and it'll allow us to plot. We don't have a lot of time, but we can make it work." Nana's gaze shifts downward, staring into Momo's eyes. "How does that sound, Momo-chan?" Momo gave the equivalent of a sullen nod before begrudgingly being dragged along by the taller woman. There was an extra chair among the users, and the individual seated in it was covered in an ethereal golden color. Their features were relatively unrecognizable, but Momo surmised that individual to be Tashinori Yagi, her mentor and All Might. "Correct," Yoichi answered softly, smiling as the young girl gazed his way. "We are merely vestiges of ourselves, a collection of consciousnesses gathered and stored within the confines of One for All. If you haven't realized it yet, we are the previous users of One for All." Momo merely accepted the statement for what it was, still overwhelmed that All for One was actually still alive. "I never said that, Momo-chan," Yoichi stated quietly. "It's merely a conjecture. I have no concrete proof, and unless the heroes are able to capture one of those experiments alive, we'll never truly know. There may be hope yet. But we can also not disprove of it either." En replied quietly, shifting in his seat, gray eyes closing for a brief moment. "We must make preparations." "She's got 3 years under her belt," Banjo boisterously stated. "That's surely enough to deal with that small fry in the arena." Hickage responded with a roll of his eyes. "It isn't that simple, Dagoro. Momo-san has created a mental limiter upon herself. Breaking a barrier like that is incredibly difficult, and until she is able to conquer her fears, she will be crippled." "Ha! What do you mean?" Banjo retorted in confusion. Nana sighs quietly, rubbing soothing circles upon Momo's shoulder. "It means, you oblivious meathead, that Momo-chan has come to the conclusion that she could never surpass Yagi-kun no matter how hard she trains, tries, and believes. It is the reason her strength is so stifled and why her body is seemingly breaking down." Nana's gaze shifts downward, staring directly into the younger girl's eyes. "Isn't that right, little one?" The warmth in the older woman's eyes fills Momo with shame. She turns her head away, unable to meet the woman's sincere gaze, lamenting on her weakness. "It's quite all right, Yayarazu-san," En supports quietly. "We all have our doubts and insecurities. We are human after all. To suspect nothing but greatness from oneself is delusion." "Speak for yourself," Banjo states emotionally. "I've always been great." "And stupid," Nana mumbles with an eye roll. "Ignore that idiot, Momo-chan. He puts on a brave face, but even he had his doubts. Daily, at that." I feel it is unnecessary to state, but perhaps you yourself need to hear it from those around you, Momo-san. Yoichi speaks confidently. You are strong, child. You are enough, and you are most certainly worthy. The heart of a hero lives within you. We can all see that. Momo wanted to deny the man's words, clinging unto her insecurities and doubts. They were all she knew. But deep, deep down, she wanted to believe him. To believe that she was worth something other than her family name. To believe that she was something. You poor girl, Nana muttered quietly, dropping to a single knee while gently caressing the girl's face. The only one who's never believed in you was you. Look around you, Momo-chan. Your friends, teachers, and even your own parents. They all believed in you before. What's stopping you from seeing that? Fear. There is nothing wrong with having fear, Momo-san. Hikich states boldly. To live life without fear is to never live at all. You are human, and you are young. You have been saddled with a responsibility that no ordinary individual can hope to understand. I would be surprised if you weren't scared. You have been entrusted with a power that's nearly a century in the making, culminated to bring an end to the ultimate evil. He leans forward in his seat, green eyes glowing with emotion. And I believe that you can conquer and stand triumphant over that evil. Momo stared into the man's eyes, feeling overwhelmed at the man's honesty and emotion. She hadn't done anything to warrant that kind of emotion and respect. How was it that they saw something in her that she couldn't? Toshinori-san entrusted one for all to you, and murmurs quietly. We have no reason to question his decision, regardless of personal feelings in the matter. If the modern-day symbol of peace believes in you, then that is enough for me. It matters not what you've previously done or felt. What matters is what you do now. Yaoyorozu-san, you can do this. Her emotions continue to stir in an uneasy frenzy, unable to truly accept the man's words despite wishing to do so. What if I fail? Momo suddenly blurts out, the shadowy veil surrounding her body suddenly fading away, revealing the entirety of her face, tears coalescing in her eyes. What if I end up as just another statistic? A failed hero who was unable to save someone when it truly mattered? One step at a time, Momo-chan. Nana responds with a confident smile, standing to her full, towering height. You think Yagi-kun never failed before? She laughs boisterously before continuing to speak earnestly. We all fail, Momo-chan. It doesn't matter whether or not you succeed or fail. All that matters is that you tried. You can't save everyone. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but one that must be taken regardless. You're going to fail. That is life. But if you don't get up. Parts of Momo's body began to unveil, the shadowy curtain slowly deteriorating the more the previous users spoke. You'll not make it in time to save that next person. Nana finishes with a warm smile, caressing the younger girl's cheek. You don't want to give up, do you? Momo's gaze fell to the floor of their realm, tears slowly falling from her eyes. She muttered quietly, ignoring how weak she sounded. No. Nana's smile became a bit mischievous as she continued. I distinctly remember a certain green-haired boy saying that he'll always be by your side to help you. Momo felt the blush creep onto her face despite the fact that tears were falling from her face. Nana continued on unperturbed, much to the amusement of the other vestiges. What if he needs help? What if he trips and falls? What if he thinks he's not good enough? Izuku wouldn't. Momo's mouth immediately clamped shut before the words could leave her mouth. Yes, he would. Nana responds softly. He's just as human as you are. He has his own doubts and his own insecurities. He's a heroic boy with a golden heart, but he's going to eventually reach his breaking point. Are you going to be there for him when it happens? Will you be his hero when he needs one? Momo instinctively wanted to shout yes, but refrained from doing so. Of course she wanted to help Izuku. He'd been so selfless with her and everyone in their class. He was the ideal hero. She was even inspired by the boy, to a certain degree. He was everything she wanted to be. She envied him for it, but she didn't hate Izuku. She just wanted to have that same confidence and conviction. But there was always that nagging voice that said she wasn't good enough. Could she even stand by his side? "Will you?" Hikage questioned, bringing Momo out of her thoughts. The question is not can you, but will you? That is the question you must answer. Will she? The entirety of Momo's body suddenly unveiled itself, the shadowy tendrils of darkness suddenly evaporating. Each of the previous wielders of One for All smiled as Momo closed her eyes, emotions running rampant. Even the two users who had refused to accept her were now gazing at her, and though they didn't smile, it was clear that she had managed to garner some amount of respect from them at the very least. "One step at a time," Nana intoned quietly, rubbing Momo's shoulder with a motherly smile. "One foot in front of the other. You don't even have to move fast, but you must always move forward. We believe in you. You can do this, Momo-chan." Momo was silent for several quiet moments before suddenly opening her eyes, revealing a pair of pink, glowing pupils. "Please, please, please," Izuku muttered frantically, streams of flame bursting out from his palms. Taking to the sky was like second nature for Izuku. Having trained with his quirk to an extensive degree, practically mastering the fire capabilities of his quirk, he had spent a long time fine-tuning his control. It was all well and good to be able to manipulate his fire to take shapes and different forms, but it was another thing entirely to have those very same flames be able to physically lift his weight up without causing external damage to his palms. It had been rocky, and he'd nearly broken more bones than he cared to admit, but the ability to fly using his fire was what he considered to be the pinnacle of his quirk. But all of that training and mastery meant nothing if he couldn't save his mother. With a renewed vigor, Izuku weaved around the buildings in Mustafu, ignoring the surprised and annoyed shouts from civilians and pro-heroes alike. Several even went as far to chase him but soon gave up, knowing a losing fight when they saw one. They probably alerted the Mustafu authorities, which would be an obvious problem, but that was an issue for future Izuku. The one decent thing about Mustafu was the fact that it lacked a pro-hero with a quirk that granted them flight-like abilities. He'd be hard-pressed to dodge someone who'd been flying their entire life on top of being a pro. He could maneuver all he liked, but it would ultimately mean nothing to someone who was a master at their craft. Ahai was roughly an hour-long journey by foot, 17 minutes by car, and roughly 23 minutes by rail cart. By flight, Izuku determined it'd be another 3 or so minutes before he finally reached his home. The entire journey had been a little over 13 minutes, traveling through the sky at a rather breakneck pace. Izuku's head throbbed as he continued to propel himself forward, ignoring that stinging sensation. A bit of blood seeped down his nose as he grit his teeth, eyes finally coming across his apartment. That throbbing sensation dulled slightly as he launched himself over the balcony, crashing against one of the walls with reckless abandon. He ignored the minor injury, idly wiping away the blood from his nose before racing towards his apartment door. Adrenaline continued to surge through his veins as his right hand wrapped around the door. Twisting the knob with reckless abandon, something he'd never do if he was in a normal hostage situation, Izuku burst into his apartment. Unfocused and wild emerald eyes shot all through the apartment, and before he could make it more than 3 steps into his home, he felt something metallic poke the side of his head. "Sup, kid? Long time no see." A familiar, deep, and menacing voice spoke. "I'd ask ya to calm down, 'cause I don't want to have to use this thing, but I definitely will if you don't relax." Izuku's body froze, eyes snapping to the left as his heart hammered in his chest. Revolver. 6 shots. 44 Magnum. Smith & Wesson model. The thoughts came and went, racing through his brain as he tried to analyze the situation. There was a gun pointed to the side of his head. Odd. He wasn't too scared to talk. The man spoke with a raised brow. "It's all right, kid. It's not every day your mama gets captured and you get held at gunpoint. I understand. Izuku's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Scared? Him? Not at all. In fact, Izuku felt nothing. Perhaps that wasn't a good thing either. This was a life or death situation. Shouldn't he be fearing for his and his mom's life? That was probably not good. He wanted to sigh in genuine frustration. This just meant another topic he'd have to bring up to Hound Dog during their weekly sessions, which was incredibly annoying, but that was obviously neither here nor there considering he had a gun to the side of his head with an arrogant and particularly annoying individual. What's with that look in your eye, huh? The man questioned in an annoyed tone. Izuku frowned at the man, slowly raising his hands in front of him to show he was complying. Why, you're just annoying. He grunted in annoyance as the man pushed the revolver further into the side of his head, clearly not appreciating his opinion. You think I won't shoot you, kid? He jabbed the weapon into Izuku's head, as if trying to actually stab him with the damn thing. At this point, you might as well do it, Izuku muttered in annoyance, getting pushed off balance due to the force of being drilled in the head. God, why are you kind of villains so annoying? Why you always think you have the upper hand and then you get embarrassed by a pro? That's so? The man said, tapping the barrel of the revolver against Izuku's skull. Well, ain't no pro here to help you today, so I think I'll be all right. He lightly smacked Izuku with the gun, motioning for the boy to walk further into the home. Get movin'. I don't want you trying something stupid. If I kill you, she'll come after me next. The man's words caused Izuku to narrow his eyes. It was fairly obvious that this guy was terrified of whoever the hitwoman was. Was this useful? Could he potentially leverage something? The thoughts raced through his brain as he walked slowly through his apartment, eyes searching for his mother. He found her not a moment later, tied up and gagged on the living room couch. Relief flooded his veins, and he very nearly raced to her side. Mom! Ignoring the man's annoyed shout, Izuku mad his way towards the woman who Lu-D both terrified and relieved that he was fine. Kneeling down beside Inko, Izuku carefully removed the tape covering her mouth. What are you doing here, Izuku? You shouldn't have come, she spoke distressfully, tears streaming down her face. I'd rather die than let that happen. He felt another dribble of blood run down his nose and quickly wiped it away, much to the concern of his mother. I'm fine. I had to push myself to make it here quickly. Inko was unable to respond as the man spoke. Yay, family reunion. Woo! He cheered unenthusiastically, waving his gun around haphazardly. Now, shut the hell up and keep your hands up. I don't want to kill anyone. Today went unsaid, but Izuku figured that was the point. Narrowing his eyes, Izuku's hands slowly rose as he spoke. What makes you think you're going to leave here alive? He ignored the surprised and yet slightly horrified expression from his mother. A dangerous look shone in the man's eyes as he tilted his head. Are you threatening me? Izuku shrugged his shoulders, fingers spread in a relaxed manner. Me? And no. But do you think that Hitwoman is gonna let you leave without a fight? After all, she kills heroes and villains. I'm just saying. The man just stared down at Izuku before chuckling quietly. Yay, nice try, kid. The bitch knows not to cross my boss. Bad things'll happen to her otherwise. Izuku frowned at his words, but still shrugged. What's realistically stopping her from just gunning down your boss too? You said it yourself. She's not exactly sane. You're just trying to get in my head, and I'm honestly kinda annoyed that it's working. The villain grumbled quietly, gun still aimed directly at Izuku. So, let's just say that she does want to kill me. What'd she get out of it, huh? Izuku furrowed his eyebrows in confusion. What? What do you mean? You heard me, shithead. What does she get out of killing me? Nothing. She doesn't need anything from you. Izuku stated as if it was obvious. She has a confirmed kill count of over 300 individuals. That's not even counting the potential murders that haven't been officially connected to her. Why you think someone with a body count that high gives a single shit about whether or not you work for some powerful crime boss? He asked in genuine disbelief. The confused and somewhat lost expression on the man's face made Izuku want to scream in frustration. Was this guy an idiot? He didn't even realize what kind of person he was dealing with. This hitwoman was an assassin. She didn't need a reason to kill anyone. This guy was a complete moron. Yeah, that don't really make sense. Are you serious? Izuku questioned in genuine frustration. Holy shit, you're a moron. She's gonna kill you the second you turn your back on her. Before the man could reply with the venomous retort on his tongue, several things happened in the blink of an eye, faster than both Izuku and the unknown villain could react. The first thing that happened was a sound that Izuku vaguely recognized. It was similar to that of an airsoft rifle, but a little more powerful. The second thing that happened was the guttural scream of pain that suddenly emanated from the man holding the gun as he dropped to the ground, clutching at his dismembered hand. Blood spurted from his mangled appendage as the man gripped his wrist tightly, in some vain attempt to will the blood to stop. All of this happened within the span of a single second, and Izuku was quick to capitalize. He immediately sprang forward, ignoring the horrified scream from his mother. He launched a vicious right hook, hand covered in flames as he connected with the man's unprotected jaw. Not bothering to continue forward, Izuku dove for the revolver on the floor, grabbing it before pointing it towards the direction of the window that the initial sniper bullet had come from. One could not blame Izuku for believing that the individual who had fired the initial bullet would appear in that very same window. So, it came as something of a surprise when he felt yet another metallic piece of metal lightly tap his skull. "Put it down," an unknown woman's voice coldly ordered. Unlike the unconscious man before him, whose deep and menacing voice did little else than annoy Izuku, this woman's voice made his blood run cold. Immediately dropping the firearm, Izuku slowly raised his hands, understanding that this woman was the very definition of different. This was a killer. "Kick it away," she ordered. Izuku did so not a moment later, watching the revolver slide towards his kitchen before bouncing off the fridge. "Turn around. Fingers interlocked behind your head," she ordered once more. "I see any sign of fire and I'll pull the trigger." She knew his quirk. She also knew his address, which meant she knew a lot more as well. If she wasn't sane, then she did a good job at hiding it. Izuku did as he was told, deliberately moving slowly so he didn't agitate the woman. Once spinning towards her direction, he was surprised at how, well, she was pretty, that was for sure. And for some reason, vaguely familiar. He knew this woman. Somehow, someway. 3 paces back. No sudden movements. She ordered calmly, eyes never once leaving Izuku's own. Izuku, of course, did as he was told. The woman's indigo and violet hair fell a little past her shoulders, impressive physique covered by a skin-tight black jumpsuit of some sort. Across her abdomen was a golden utility belt that held several canisters of some sort. Izuku liked to believe that they were various sorts of grenades. Stun, flash, and smoke grenades respectively. However, the most striking feature, if you didn't count her impressive body, was the barrel of the sniper rifle that protruded from her elbow. There was even a unique-looking crosshair that sprang from the gun, curling upwards towards the woman's face that resembled a scope. "Don't blink," she calmly demanded, expression completely blank and unreadable. Izuku had no time to question what that meant when the woman fired her rifle. Even if he had wanted to, he'd have been unable to react. Thankfully, though, the bullet she fired whisked past his face before abruptly curving around the apartment, piercing directly through the skull of the unconscious man. Inko's horrified scream resounded a moment later, and Izuku merely grimaced, expecting that particular outcome to occur. Didn't make it any less shocking or disturbing, though. "I want to talk," she stated emotionlessly, retracting her rifle. "Just like that? Why you? Want to talk? Izuku stuttered in quiet disbelief. Did you expect something else? She questioned, a single eyebrow raising casually. Izuku's eyebrows furrowed at her question. I mean, kinda, he exclaimed, slightly frustrated. This guy broke into my house, took my mother hostage, and threatened to kill her if I didn't come alone. The hitwoman glanced towards the boy's mother, a small frown etching itself onto her face. My intention wasn't to involve your mother, nor was it the instructions I gave to him. The woman walked away from Izuku, back completely wide open with not a care in the world about potential retaliation from Izuku. In her eyes, he wasn't a threat. However, Izuku wasn't so stupid as to take the very obvious bait. This woman made his skin crawl. She could probably chamber her rifle faster than he could even blink. Trying to attack her while her back was turned was practically a death sentence. Smart boy, she murmured quietly, walking over to the corpse. She stared down at his skull before reaching towards the bullet wound and picking out the bullet. Izuku cringed at hearing the woman twist and stretch the man's skin, digging the bullet out of his skull with her bare hands. She was eventually successful in her endeavor, uncaring of the blood that dropped onto their carpeted floors. She stood back to her feet before placing the bullet in her palm, some kind of contraption forming there before it morphed away, revealing unblemished skin. With her rifle reloaded once more, she transformed it before firing the same bullet directly into the man's chest, piercing his heart. Izuku frowned as the woman picked the bullet out once more. What an unnecessary double tap. It was clear to him that the man was already dead. It's my calling card, she answered the unasked quietly. One bullet to the head and one bullet to the heart. Finally, picking the bullet out of the man's chest, she placed the projectile into one of the various canisters before rising back to her feet. 310 confirmed. And unconfirmed? He asked hesitantly. What do you think of the HPSC? She instead questioned, walking over to Izuku's mother before grabbing a knife from her utility belt. Her actions made Izuku tense, but it was for naught as she did little else than cut the restraints holding the woman. Pointing the knife directly at Inko's face, the hitwoman spoke calmly. Stay. Inko didn't bother questioning the woman, absolutely terrified of her. She only curled away, resting against the arm of the sofa while trying to make herself as invisible as possible. I don't know much about them, he answered truthfully. However, like most government-sanctioned operations, I assume there's a lot of dirt they try to cover up. It was apparently the right thing to say as the woman immediately focused her gaze back onto Izuku. An unrecognizable emotion passed through her purple eyes before returning to their icy demeanor. Do you know who I am, Midoriya-san? She questioned blankly, making her way towards the kitchen to retrieve the firearm that Izuku kicked. Izuku watched the woman intently, eyebrows furrowed as he tried to name the woman. She was so familiar. The hair color, the outfit, even the quirk. He knew this woman, but he just couldn't place it. Retrieving the firearm, she spoke once more. Does the name Giga Polar Bear mean anything to you? She questioned while casually grabbing a dishcloth to wipe the weapon clean of fingerprints. You research and follow heroes, don't you, Midoriya-san? How in the world did she know that? And yes, the name Giga Polar Bear did ring a bell with him. He was a relatively known pro in Tokyo. He rose the popularity charts pretty quickly after debuting. Within a year, he had already broke through the top 25. He was 23 years old when he unfortunately passed away in a villain attack. Izuku's lips parted as information just rushed through his lips, dots being connected shortly afterwards. They found his body in an alley. He had been gunned down, one bullet to the skull, and one through the heart. The woman said nothing, placing the revolver on her utility belt before sitting down upon Izuku's dinner table. Giga Polar Bear was one of many corrupt pro-heroes that I targeted. She leaned forward, eyes staring directly into Izuku's soul. After Giga Polar Bear's death, I became disillusioned with the way things were run. Children of all ages looked up to me. I was an icon for any female pro. used as a template for what a true pro-hero should be. Her eyes became decidedly hollow, purple irises resembling an abyss. Do you understand how difficult it is to wash away blood from your hands? Do you know what it feels like to rub your hands raw with bleach, desperately trying to wash away your sins? Little girls worshipped me, wanting autographs and to shake my hand, ignorant of the blood that stained my palms. Raising her hand to her face, the woman continued, I didn't know what was reality. I killed without question. Pro-hero. Villain. She clenched her fist tightly. A target was just that. Something to put down. They were not human. I spiraled. Down and down I went, with no aid. A shell of my former self. The public praised me for my heroic deeds. Those blank eyes regarded Izuku in an uncaring manner, causing his skin to itch uncomfortably. I slaughtered innocent pro-heroes, helpless villains, and even aspiring competitors of the HPSC. You asked me how many unconfirmed kills I have. No. When Izuku didn't answer, she continued. Do you question the ants you potentially step upon? Do you count the individual grains of sand on a beach? Izuku was horrified. Who are you? The woman was silent for a moment before a small smile graced her beautiful face. You may call me Lady Nagant. Izuku's eyes widened, recognition finally dawning upon him. Lady Nagant had been a young woman with a long-ranged quirk that outshone even Snipe. He remembered when the woman had debuted. The pinpoint-accurate sniper, Lady Nagant, they called her, possessing the ability to create a rifle using her body, creating ammunition using only her hair. Tsutsumi Kei Kaina, Izuku abruptly blurted out, causing the woman's smile to become a bit more genuine. I haven't heard that name in years. She spoke with a hollow smile. Were you a fan? I remember when you debuted, he answered quietly. You had an incredible run for the first 2 years and then you disappeared. I was made into the HPSC's personal attack dog. Lady Nagant spoke calmly. Any pro-hero that stepped out of line, I put down. Any villain becoming a bit too big for their liking, I put down. Competitors, axed. I soon lost my grip on reality. I didn't know right from wrong. I questioned everything. Became depressed. Day and night. Bullet after bullet. Grave after grave. Deaths by the dozen. She paused for a moment as those emotions threatened to overwhelm her. I wished to be released from this burden, and it was right there that I snapped. Threatened with death when I opposed my superiors, I killed my handlers before disappearing and going underground. All I know how to do is kill. Those purple eyes held little regard for life, and Izuku nearly shivered as they stared into his soul. Who are you, Izuku Midoriya? Will you just be another unfortunate target in my scope? Will I have to stain my hands with your blood? Will you be the light to my darkness? Izuku nearly took a step backwards at the last question. The light. To her darkness. You seem confused, she murmured quietly, head tilted in a curious manner. What does that mean? You and I. We are a lot alike, Midoriya-san, she stated blankly. We are nothing alike, he defended fiercely. Lady Nagant rose a delicate eyebrow. No. What did you say you wanted to be? A beacon of hope? She crossed her arms against her bosoms, leaning forward to regard Izuku. If you are the light, then I am the darkness. For every good deed you commit is a bullet I load into my rifle. For every villain you stop is one that I will put down. For every person you save is a corrupt hero I exterminate. Her purple eyes flashed dangerously, emotion finally bubbling in her voice. If you are the justice that this country needs, then I will be the vengeance it deserves. The fervor in her voice nearly made Izuku cringe. So many lives lost, so many lives that would be taken away. Even after hearing Kaina's story, Izuku could scarcely believe that she became the woman before him. She reeked of death. You cannot kill every villain, he exclaims fiercely. And just because a pro-hero is corrupt doesn't mean they deserve to die. We can't be the executioners. Kaina fixed the boy with an unimpressed stare. It's not a matter of whether I wish to be or not to be. I simply am, Midoriya-san. Death is all I know. It is the only way in which I can mete out justice against those who wish to do wrong. Izuku's expression becomes conflicted as he responds. That isn't fair, Kaina-san. You're not allowing these people a chance to redeem themselves. Not every villain is inherently evil. How can you condemn them to death for one mistake? How can you just kill someone for abusing an already corrupt system? Kaina is unperturbed by the boy's emotionally charged questions. I used to be just like you, Midoriya-san. I wished to be a true hero, one that saved any and everybody I came across. I saw the good in the bad. At one point, I even advocated for better treatment of villains. She paused for a moment, frown marring her features. And then I drowned in a sea of blood, unable to surface. I realized that fighting against a corrupt system was pointless. I could kill each and every HPSC member that made me who I am, and another would just fill its place. When I came to this conclusion, I gave up. There is no winning when those above you only wish to see you fail. There is only one way to truly stop me, Midoriya-san. Standing to her feet, Kaina rose both of her arms, closing her eyes with a serene expression upon her face. Kill me. Bring justice to those I killed. Izuku shook his head fiercely, frustration mounting. Why, you can't ask me to do that. I will not be the judge, jury, and executioner. Kaina opened her eyes, fitting Izuku with a harsh stare. Is that before or after you killed those 8 villains during the Uschi incident? When push comes to shove, you have no issue doing what's needed. Izuku's expression becomes harsh as he finally moves his hands from behind his head. I was protecting my friends and classmates. He avoids her piercing gaze, staring down at the ground with a frustrated frown. But I don't regret what happened. I'll never regret taking their lives over prioritizing the lives of my friends. If there was a path I could have taken where death was avoided, then I would have taken it. Then you aren't different than I am, Kaina states simply. You and I are nothing alike. I know that what I was wrong, Izuku rebukes fiercely. And you believe that I am unaware? She questions with a raised brow, causing Izuku to temporarily back down. I know that killing these men and women are wrong. Do you think I'm insane? A psychotic? Tilting her head in an eerie manner, Kaina continued. Death is all I know, Midoriya-san. This is the only way I know how to help. And if you turn out just like the others. Faster than Izuku could even react, Lady Nagant suddenly blitzed forward, arm transforming into her signature rifle as she placed the barrel of her quirk directly upon Izuku's forehead. I will kill you, she states simply, ignoring his shock and surprise at her sheer speed. Without warning, her eyes cut to the front door. A small frown then forms on her face before she retreats backwards. Just in time, too, as a stream of fire suddenly erupts from the Izuku's apartment doors. The stream of fire rushes through the space that Kaina had previously occupied. A moment passes as the number 2 ranked pro hero, Endeavor, walks through the entrance of the apartment. Inji-san. Kaina greets casually as she sits in the window panel she had originally come through when sneaking into Izuku's home. It's certainly been a long time. Endeavor's eyes never start away from the woman, despite the fact that her quirk is inactive. Kaina was an incredibly dangerous woman for a reason, and Enji was taking no chances considering she had 2 potential hostages within her sight. With a range of nearly 3 kilometers, these 2 were in danger no matter where they were. This was a fight he could certainly win. If he was alone. It certainly has, Lady Nagant. He rumbles quietly, flames roaring around his body as he slowly moved forward into the apartment. That's far enough. Kaina speaks casually. I'm not above killing one of them to escape. What's your goal? Inji questions while halting. You'll find out soon enough. She slowly maneuvers out of the window before speaking one final time. A gift from me to you, Midoriya-san. She reaches towards her utility belt before unhooking a canister and throwing it towards the boy's position. It rolls along the carpet before coming to a stop at Izuku's feet. I eagerly await your answer, Izuku. Kaina immediately departs, disappearing in a burst of speed. Not a moment later does Endeavor race towards the window, trying in vain to spot the elusive assassin. Seeing nothing, the pyro quirk user sighs quietly before turning his attention towards the mother and son. The two embrace one another fiercely, the mother whispering quietly as the boy tries to placate her. This boy had already been through enough. Now he was being targeted by one of the most dangerous assassins in all of Japan. As if the boy didn't have enough on his plate already, Inji pitied his son's friend. I was going to question your decision of unregulated quirk usage, but now I see that it's irrelevant. Inji grunts quietly, slowly making his way towards the mother and son. Are you two all right? He questions, though his eyes land on the corpse in the corner of the apartment. He assesses the body, noting the 2 bullet hole wounds. One to the head, one to the heart. Inji nearly sighs in frustration, but refrains from doing so for appearance sake. The amount of paperwork he was going to need to fill out already had his hand cramping up. The mother and son wave off Endeavor's question, or rather, the son does. It causes a frown to form on Inji's face. He recognizes that haunted look in the boy's eyes, that confusion and sense of loss. It was unnerving seeing it upon one so young. Established and veteran pros should only possess that haunted gaze, not a teenage boy. But what could he say to the kid? It'll be all right. It gets better. Stay strong. Inji nearly scoffed. Empty words that held no value or worth. Whatever Lady Nagant had said to the boy clearly affected him. This wasn't something that could be solved with a single conversation, and Inji hated to say it. But he wasn't the man for that particular job. Endeavor opened his mouth to speak before his work phone began to ring, distracting him. Quietly excusing himself, he left the living room before stepping out towards the entrance of the apartment. Endeavor here. What is it, burnin'? Where are you? The arena is under attack, the feisty woman demanded, sounding out of breath. The sounds of screams and explosions were heard for a moment before she spoke again. Get back to you. Now, Merco isn't going to be able to hold off that beast much longer. She immediately hung up the phone afterwards, causing Enji to curse. A villain attack? Now, of all times, he had some shitty luck today. Turning towards the entrance of the apartment, Inji frowned upon seeing Izuku's concerned face. Endeavor? What's happening at UA? Dare he tell the kid? He had already been through enough today. If he told him, he'd likely shoot off towards UA, desperately trying to provide some kind of aid or another. Enji wanted to placate the boy, stating that everything was under control. Endeavor, however, knew that the boy needed to hear this. Ahai is currently under attack. I advise that you remain. He didn't even get to finish his sentence before the boy was airborne, flames jettisoning from his palms as he rocketed towards the direction of UA. This time, Inji did sigh in frustration. Damn kids. He rubbed his face quietly before turning back towards the Midoriya household. He was surprised to see the boy's mother hovering at the entrance, eyes glued to her flying son. There was obvious concern and fear in her gaze, but he also spotted the pride she held for her son. He doesn't know when to quit, she muttered quietly, eyes glistening with tears. Please, protect my son, she pleads with a bow. Endeavor nearly frowns at the woman's display, clearly uncomfortable with that level of respect being shown. I'll do my best, Midoriya-san. He nods his head before bending his knees and jumping, jettisoning flames from the soles of his feet before blasting forward, trying to keep pace with Izuku. It is a pale imitation, though, as Endeavor is unable to actually fly using his flames, unlike Izuku, who has little issue with flight. Inko watches the 2 pyro quirk users fly away before sighing quietly. She turns towards her apartment, eyeing the dead body sprawled on her carpet floors. Why me? She mutters pitifully, not looking forward to cleaning up dried blood from her carpets. Merco grunts painfully, muscles flexing in vain as she tries to hold back the behemoth before her. Her rabbit-like feet crater the arena ground, muscles expanding and rippling as she's pushed further and further down into the concrete ground. Blood is spattered all throughout her hero costume, rips and tears revealing bruised and toned skin. Dry blood stains her beautiful white hair, mixed with bits of concrete and dust from being thrown around by the giant Nomu. "Tea that all you got?" she screamed hoarsely before flexing the muscles in her thighs and foregoing blocking. The Nomu's fist scythes downwards, nearly taking one of the woman's eyes out before cratering the arena ground, an enormous shockwave exploding outwards from the force of its brutal attack. The creature gazed upwards just in time for Merco's right leg to crater its face. With a guttural roar, Merco follows through, sending the Nomu flinging into one of the arena walls, nearly having the creature blast through the arena itself. Merco's form is weary and exhausted. One of her eyes is completely shut, blackened by a nasty wound. Sweat cascades down her muscular form as she heaves, nearly swaying on her feet. Wiping a bit of blood from her lips using her non-broken arm, Merco spits on the concrete floors. "I ain't done with ya. Gee, get up, so I can kill you again." She takes a step forward, nearly tripping and falling forward as exhaustion finally settles in. 15 minutes. 15 brutal minutes with no backup, no aid, and only pure grit and brazen strength. Rumi knew her body was moments away from giving out. She'd given it her all and then some. But it was clear to her that this creature was just built different. It was almost like fighting all might. It just kept coming. Under any normal circumstances, Merco would have been fine with it, but considering this monster couldn't actually be killed, it left a bitter taste in her mouth. There had yet to be a problem in her life that Merco couldn't tackle without outright just kicking it in the face. But this was one of those moments. Teetering on her feet, Merco glances towards the arena stands, staring at the various corpses of heroes and unlucky civilians alike. At this point, the other creatures had either been dealt with or driven away from the stands. There was still various heroes here and there, and some even watching her brawl with the Nomu. Thankfully, those left watching did just that. If they jumped down here, they'd just end up getting in her way and then wind up dead for not being fast enough. Several times Merco had skirted death with this abomination, and if something didn't change, she was likely going to be next. But thankfully she'd stall the creature enough that most of the civilians had already been evacuated. At least there was a silver lining here. She'd die, having fought like her life depended on it, and then would be praised for generations to come. Merco the Miracle Rabbit. It'd be a corny-ass tombstone, but one that she didn't mind. Red eyes slowly tilted towards the skies, gazing up at the puffy white clouds. A rare and rather serene expression formed on Rumi's beautiful face as she watched the clouds slowly drift. If it was her time, then she'd welcome it with open arms. She'd fought the good fight, trained like a maniac, and had raunchy sec like the rabbit she truly was. Life hadn't been so bad for Rumi Uzajima. She didn't bother trying to react to the mutated-looking fist that suddenly appeared before her, ignoring it in favor of gazing up at the clouds. To her great surprise, however, the fist was suddenly redirected upwards before practically evaporating. There was a brief shockwave that accompanied the sudden parry before an unseen blur of pink slammed into the massive hulk of black flesh and muscle. Merco's eyes widened immensely as the Nomu rocketed towards the stands before crashing through the entirety of the stands, ripping a bloody trench nearly 3 diameters in size through the earth. "What the?" she questioned tiredly, eyes slowly flicking to the outstretched fist, covered in a translucent pink glow. The energy seemed to zap and crackle, bubbling just beneath the surface before ultimately settling down. "Hey, you're that girl. The Yaoyorozu brat, yeah?" Momo tilted her head towards Rumi, eyes glowing like pink diamonds before retracting her outstretched fist. Her glowing eyes ran over Merco's battered and beaten form before returning her gaze to the recovering Nomu. "I've got it from here," the young teen states confidently before walking forwards, idly taking off her a tracksuit jacket, revealing the all-black spandex sports bra covering her chest. "Get some rest, Merco-san. Get some rest? Get some rest." Just who in the hell did this little girl think she was talking to? She was Rumi Uzajiyama, the number 5 ranked pro hero. "Oi!" Merco screamed in annoyance, taking a step forward before abruptly falling to a single knee, muscles cramping and giving out on her. "Who ya think you're talking to? Hey, I'm speaking to you." Momo said nothing as she continued to stalk forward, lithe and voluptuous frame suddenly bulking up significantly, gaining extra muscle mass everywhere across her body. "I'm done holding back," Momo muttered quietly, though Rumi still heard her. "I'm someone now, one step at a time." She cracks her neck side to side while rolling her shoulders. "Even if I have to crawl, I just have to move forward." Momo took one more step before blurring out of sight, shocking Merco due to the sudden increase in speed. Her eyes failed to follow the girl, but she definitely felt the aftermath of the girl's attack. Merco watched with some measure of awe as the entire left side of the arena stands suddenly ceased to exist, a tremendous shockwave erasing everything in sight. This girl. No way she was the same one as before. The power she was throwing around was something only akin to All Might himself. What was going on? Her awe-induced state was interrupted as she felt a pair of hands slowly lift her up. Normally, Rumi would have potentially bit the hands off, giving whoever thought they could touch her an absolute tongue-lashing, but she was so enthralled by the power she was witnessing that she allowed herself to be carried away. She ignored the pro hero who began to run away from the arena, the quakes and shockwaves emanating not but 50 meters away from her only getting stronger and stronger. Rumi's crimson eyes never strayed away from the young girl as she not only matched the creature but began to push it back. "I want that," she mumbled to herself, ignoring everything around her in favor of admiring Momo's newfound strength. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through What If Introvert Deku Had a Flame Quirk. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout-out to Razuhfy for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on fanfiction.net for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to What If Deku 2 for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.